Hey guys, Ghazzy TV here with the recently emerged podcast. Sit down with insert guest name, friend, whatever you want to call it. And this time we're bringing in Path of Matth, a good friend of mine, playing Path of Exile. So welcome in Path of Matth to the podcast.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here, man.
Perfect. I'd like to have you on board on this as well. It's a rather new started podcast where we have one set topic, and that is just the general game we're going to talk about. And with me and Path of Math, that is obviously going to be Path of Exile. And that's literally it. There's no structure, there's no podcast questions, there is literally nothing. It's just me calling up a friend saying, hey, how you doing? And then we're just going to see where the conversation leads. And that's it. There's nothing more to say. So, yeah, Pat, hi. How you doing? What have you been up to lately?
I mean, as always, but we're a little over a month into the league, so I started doing these zero to hero challenges. I just got done BPL yesterday. Actually, I played for like the first 2 days. That was actually a blast. So I've been keeping really busy. I mean, I did my zero to hero, jumped into BPL, now we're jumping into another one. So really busy. The game is just really fun right now.
Yeah, for sure. The Sea to Hero. What's your next project you're doing right now?
Well, today I'm probably just gonna do some magic finding. Got to gather some data, but tomorrow starting another zero hero. Probably gonna be hideout warrior. Seems to be what people really want to see right now. So that's obviously always one that's really elusive to people. Uh, they like it's kind of like nobody really knows how, but then the people who do know how don't want other people to know how to make currency from just sitting in their hideout. So
Yeah.
it's always a really interesting one. But it's always really hard as a streamer to do these sort of challenges that are currency based, uh, that are related to trading, because if even just a few people start doing exactly what you're doing, it can murder the ability to make any currency in a given market instantly. So those are always a really challenging ones, but they're also really fun.
Yeah, just a common question with like most of my currency I make every league is always profit crafting, and it's the same thing there. Everyone keeps asking,
Yep.
"What do you craft for profit?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can tell you what I usually do, but then I'm not gonna make any currency myself." So I
Yeah.
like held off for it like for 3 or 4 leagues, and then I told everyone a couple of them, and it didn't take more than a few weeks, and the entire money making of that just completely plummeted across the entire board. You find some other sweet spot. I mean, you can still make profit out of it, but there's a difference between making 2 3 times the investment compared to 10 20 30 times the investment. It kind of hurts that. It's like the whole idea of having currency strategy, especially with hideout warriors, where it's all about like playing by the market rules. If more people are doing it, it diminishes the entire return so fast. Especially when people that are inexperienced with it starts flooding the market, and it just completely destroys it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to just go ahead and like do some, say, profit crafting in bulk and then do like 10 pairs of boots, but you should never post those 10 pairs at once. You should post them one or two at a time maximum, and then just, slowly but surely make it seem like they're not that common. Because the moment people realize that this is a super common thing and it's super easy to make, then they're no longer going to be willing to pay whatever the price tag was. They're just going to wait until it goes down because they know you've got 10 sitting there, so you're gonna have to sell them at some point. So it's the same thing with crafting. It's the same thing with flipping, right? It could be even like flipping essences. You'll start flipping an essence. Say you buy for a chaos or two, and then you sell it in bulk for 5 or 6 chaos. You're making 200 to 300% return on your investment. It's crazy, and it's really fast because these are being posted all the time. It only takes a few people to start buying up these essences, and then all of a sudden trying to be like, oh well, I got to make my money back. I got to sell them, and then it's just an undercut war, and all of a sudden people are making like not even a chaos profit per essence they're purchasing, and then it's just no longer a feasible way of making currency. And it's the same thing for pretty much anything that is in regards to being a hideout warrior. So unfortunately, that's kind of what it makes it a challenge, I guess. If I was to do these off stream, it would be a lot easier. But then, of course, there wouldn't be any content to come out of it, which is, well, priority number one is always content and teaching people things. So
Mm.
even if in the end I end up making less currency, I guess it's kind of like you, right? We choose content over, pixelated, mirrors or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately the goal with content creators like us, where we try to make sure that the community is as informed as we can make it. We choose basically straight up to make less out of it. I mean, the way we're playing, we can make tons and tons of it, and then just sit on that knowledge ourselves, which is what a lot of people are doing. And then they get angry with content creators like us for providing the information.
Oh yeah. Oh, that they do. That they do. I get those messages all the time. Oh, fuck you. I've been doing this. I make a video. It's like, fuck you, Path of Math. I was doing this for like a week now. It's dead. It's like the video's 300 views. I just posted it. The guy's like, it's dead now. You can't do this. You can't magic fight anymore. You can't kill bosses anymore. It's like, well, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
really?
Oh, it's funny. I remember, was it a league or 2 leagues ago? Uh, oh, which league was it? I think it was Ritual League. I made 400 plus two minion ones, and
Jeez.
the average profit was 25 to 27x each in the end. And I lost money on like three of them. And then people got all, stream RNG when you hit that big sweet spot, with the perfect
Right.
ingredients,
Yeah.
right? But when you craft that many of something, like that's one of the things you want to do with profit crafting. You want to craft a lot of it, but you don't want to flood the market because the idea is that you have a difference between the difference between the average crafting cost versus the worst sellable outcome. As long as the difference there is big enough, you're gonna make money no matter what you do. And the more
Yep.
of them you craft, eventually you're gonna inevitably hit that big sweet spot item that's gonna sell for multiple times the amount of currency. And that's just the way you do it with profit crafting. And when that happens, then you make even more. But the idea is to make sure that no matter what you do, you always profit craft. Or same thing with farming, with investments. As long as your investments is always going to be less than your return from the maps you're running, then you can always make money. You don't have to rely on RNG or dropping a doctor card, for example, on those things. You don't have to go for that RNG drop. Just make sure that whatever you do is always going to net you an income. Then you're doing it the right way, no matter how big or small it is, right?
Yeah, I think one a really good example for that right now is magic finding. Magic finding is super big right now. It seems like everyone's magic finding,
Hmm.
and people are coming to my stream and they're seeing that I'm using all these unique watchstones, these awakened sextus, and these scarabs and all that as a solo player. Like, dude, you're investing over an X a map. Like, there's no way you're making 1x every single map back. And it's like, well, every set of 4 maps, if I make back 5x without a single lucky drop, just from the stuff that I'm usually going to get, aka nurse cards, exile drops. Those are not considered lucky when you're investing that much. Like, they're very consistent. Then I'm making 1x every 4 maps. Now, this is not great profit, but this is consistent. And then if I make this 1x profit every 4 maps, and eventually I drop a squire, a headhunter, an inspired learning, and a natural instinct, then I get a nice little boost, like boom, 3x, 5x, 10x, 20x, 100x. Right? The other day I dropped the squire, 160x or whatever. Uh, or you drop a headhunter, or even a mage blood, right? The elusive mage blood this league. It's all about dropping that thing. Um, so whenever that happens, then you take the value of that divided by the number of hours that you've been doing, and all of a sudden it looks like your strategy went from like a 3-4 exalt strategy to like a 12x strategy. And the thing is, it's bound to happen. There's no way that you magic find that many maps if you're actually like doing it a lot and you never find anything. It's like impossible unless you're doing something terribly wrong.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can invest upwards of multiple exalts even per map and still be profitable. I think the thing that a lot of people really need to understand when it comes to investing in this game, especially for mapping, is that there's pretty much no such thing as too much investment. Even as a solo player, outside of like Wing Scarab, I don't go using Wing Scarab as a solo player. Maybe early in the league, sure. Uh, but at this point, definitely not. But even Gilded Scarabs, I've some friends who are doing solo Magic Find, investing nearly 2x per map, and they're still turning a profit on average every 4 maps. Because sets of 4 maps because the sexton for 4 uses. So as long as you're turning a profit, even if it's a minimal profit, the thing is, the more juice you put into your map, the more times in that given map you're spinning the RNG wheel to drop those big ticket items, and whenever they drop, that's kind of your payday. And it's the same thing for crafting, right?
Mm.
Let's just say you were talking about minion ones, but I'll just take some boots, tailwind and onslaught, elevated tailwind onslaught boots, because they're a very common craft used by a lot of builds. Uh, if I'm making these boots and I'm making on average one, two, uh, well, it's more than that, but say I'm making on average 4 or 5x per pair of boots that I'm making. It's a lot of work to make only 4 or 5x per pair of boots, especially at this point in the league. It's a lot of work to do all this, you got to alt spam, imprint, then you got to reforge the thing, and then you got a Maven orb, and if you fail, you got to go back and you got to do all this right to get your elevated double elevated pair of boots, and then that doesn't even count the prefixes. But let's say after every pair of boots, I make 4 or 5x profit, but eventually I'm going to hit that Awakener orb just right. I'm going to get T1 Int, or I'm going to get T1 Chaos Res, maybe T1 Dex. And then all of a sudden, that 60x pair of boots is worth 120, and that's kind of where I make the bulk of my profit through bulk crafting. Is when you get that big Awakener's orb with that third mod, kind of like you were saying with the ones. If you're doing the 4 socket resonators on average, it's what, 11 of them or something to get +2 for minion ones. Eventually you're bound to get like a good minion damage roll, and that's when you're going to get the most of your the bulk of your currencies, when you get really really lucky. And as long as every time that you fail or get unlucky, you're paying yourself back, then you're never losing.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with like the Absolution helmet craft right now. I think the first one I crafted for cost me about 100x to craft, and I can sell it for about 200x now. But the thing is, the process of doing that was it was so frustratingly annoying. The craft is very simple, but it requires so many reforged keep suffix, and then you have to go into the corruption with a crazy vassal, and then start using the tainted teardrops, which doubled in price ever since. And it's like it's the same process there. It's very easy to do. It's just a super annoying process, and people will, in many cases, the harder the item is to craft, the more people are willing to pay a lot more than the average crafting cost, because they don't have to go through that process of crafting, especially when the craft includes buying a higher quantity of things they have to go through third-party websites such as TFT for, right? There's a lot of those things. And something I recently did when it comes to profiting, been showing that a little bit on stream, or quite a lot last week. That was the low investment profit stuffs. Because what we're talking about, multiple exalted investments versus the profit return, and same thing with crafting. We're talking about multiple exalteds worth of crafting. And something that's very common within the community is people having issues where what can you craft to make money when you barely have any currency? And normally the answer would be like you just play the game and try to find some big ticket items or sell everything that you can sell to make the money so that you can start profit crafting. And I mean, even if you start a profit craft, say take the boots that you were talking about with the elevator strategy, I mean, you can get unlucky and fail the Maven Ores 5 times in a
Oh
row.
yeah.
So I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's not a guaranteed profit. So a lot of those things is normally comes down to the point where you need to find like a stable way to make currency that you cannot lose money on. So you can always fall back on that, something that is always profitable, such as the magic find strategy that you talked about. Running those even with the investments there, always making sure that no matter what you're investing in, you're always making profit. And the big ticket items are the paydays. That's what I did with the essence farming. Now I know Hamlet is very commonly used for it with the blight and sorry, not blight, metamorph and essence farming, for example. I'm buying a gilded metamorph scarab, and I just go in and pay 3C for the essence. I think the current market price of buying them in a bulk cost me 10 to 11 chaos per map, and I just alch and go. No matter what I do in those maps, I am making that currency back, and every time I get into the corrupted essences and whatnot by bringing some remnants in, that's just big money. And if I get anything big out of that, fine, great. Pop the catalyst from the metamorphs and all of that. There's so much money to be had. No matter what I do, I can not bring remnants and still make money out of it. So that's just an easy way with like very low amount of currency to start building a bulk. If you have nothing, you need to make sure that you play by your wallet basically when it comes to investments. As long as you do
Oh yeah.
something that is always profitable, so you cannot lose currency with your game time. And that's kind of where you're going to start, right? And then when you have more currency, so you get a lucky drop or get a couple of X and whatnot, and then you start using that to look into the bigger ones. And it just escalates. And that's what people like you and me do, and many other crafters in the game. We start with nothing like everyone else. So we just try to sell everything we can, build up that baseline currency. Then we start profit crafting or start investing into our character to do more invested maps, such as magic find characters. And then that just escalates. And then, it just goes like a snowball down the hill. It ramps up very quickly, and then we blow it up on double corrupting and mage blood. I mean,
Yeah, no, I mean it's the I mean, even when I was talking about magic finding, where I said this example where I said, there's no such thing as too much investment outside of, I guess, wing scarab territory. That's probably more for just groups. Definitely not necessarily something you want to be, spending multiple exalts per map as a solo player. But um, Not even necessarily also because of the price, but the annoyance of having to buy wings because you want to buy in bulk, right? When
Mm.
I said sets of 4 maps for magic finding, that's not a lot of time. You don't want to have to buy bulk wing scarabs. First off, they don't exist. Second off, when they do exist, they're overpriced as hell. So it's not really a possibility. But the thing is, even if there's no such thing as too much investment, if you don't have a lot of currency, it doesn't mean that you're stuck not making money, right? Like when I started my Magic Find journey, I started with investing about 10 C per map, and I was still making about 2 3x an hour, which for a lot of people that's a decent amount of currency to be making, especially when you're investing very little into your map to map basis. And then after that, then you make that 2 3x an hour, you get a lucky drop here and there, whatever it is, all of a sudden you have 20x. Now you can start investing say 50 C per map, and instead of making 2 to 3x an hour, you're going to start making 4 to 5x an hour. And that's kind of like you're saying, the snowball, right? I mean, we start with absolutely nothing, just like everyone else at the start of a league. We start with nothing, and we have to. There's no such thing as the streamer client. There's no such thing as streamer luck. We drop more exalt or whatever. I didn't drop my first exalt before I killed my Awakener 8 Cyrus, uh, and I was level somewhere in the 90s, and I hadn't dropped an exalt yet. Like there's no such thing as that. It is just RNG is RNG. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. But the majority of the time, as long as you're doing something that doesn't require you to get lucky to make profit, then when you do get lucky, it's just a bonus, right?
Mm.
So it's the same thing as you're saying with these metamorphs and all that. Sure, you can just buy this gilded metamorph scarab, do the essence on the mad device. You're investing like 10 C per map. You're getting maybe 20, 30 C per map return. You're making 2 to 300, two to three times your investment. And then after that, eventually these metamorphs are known to drop, like, obviously their fragments, and you'd go into Tain's lab and do the fragment on top of that. So that's additional value that's not even accounted for here. And that's bound to drop exalts or good div cards or this or that, and all those things add up very very quickly.
Mm.
I think the main issue, I think one of the things that people really need to start doing is grabbing something like excellence. Well, actually, it's pretty much the best right now. Like getting excellence next, installing that, and realizing that it's not because you're not dropping pure exalts and pure chaos that you're not making money. Like I was playing BPL yesterday, and I got to my Awakener 8 Cyrus, I killed him. And so I had done at least a couple hundred reps, right? By that point. I had 39 chaos in my stash, and I had not used any. I was like, wait, from the beginning of the game all the way up to the very like end game Awakener 8 Cyrus, I have found 39 chaos orbs. That's it. It's like chaos is actually a rare currency to find. Uh, which is kind of crazy how it gets so devalued over time. I guess because of things like the Nemesis 3 Sextants.
Mm.
But chaos is a rare currency. So if you count how much money you're making in pure chaos and currency in exile drops, you're going to be like, dude, I'm not making any money. I see this all the time, right? In YouTube comment sections, on Reddit, whatever it is, on my stream. I make 10 C per hour. No, you don't. Unless you're sitting in your hideout not doing anything. I mean, if you do one map every hour, maybe you'll make 10 C an hour. But like, there's no way, right? You're actually making a lot more than you think you are. And the problem is people get discouraged by seeing the fact that their chaos or exalt stack is not going up, but they're ignoring every other tab that they have in their stash. That value is going up. Even maps to some extent are worth something, right?
Mm.
Maybe not so much this league; they're not worth a ton, but
Yeah.
um, all these other things are adding up. So getting something like excellence next and realizing that they are making profit is not only gonna, well, obviously make them realize that, but it's also really encouraging because they realize that they are making progress, and then they're more likely to be more efficient. So the first thing I say when people tell me to, how do I make, how am I make, how should I do to go about making currency? I'm doing Alchem Go Red Maps. I'm making 10 C an hour. First thing I tell them, get excellence, man. Like get excellence next, install that thing, and you'll see that you're making a lot more than you think you are.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that the excellence because like I've always been very negative towards needing third-party programs or third-party websites when you talk about TFT. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that we have TFT because God forbid that we didn't have them. That would be terrible, but I hate the fact that we need them. But I think that they are doing a really good job. But the fact that we have to use so many third-party programs is something that's always been something that made me really dislike playing the game in many cases. So I only use the Wake and PoE trade. That's it. That's all I'm using. And the more I play after like the amount of years I've been playing this game, excellence is what I'm probably gonna start using that by tomorrow and learning that because of what you're talking about. A lot of people don't understand the value of what they have other than the commonly used trading orbs like the influence exalted mirrors, and chaos orbs, right? And what I usually tell people is that they have a lot, they're richer than they think, right? They say I only have 5 chaos and 1 exalted in my stash, but then they might be sitting on 260 different essences, which is worth multiple exalteds. Same thing with catalyst. I haven't even sold my catalyst, and I think I have like 15-20x worth of catalyst sitting in my stash right now. I'm just too lazy to sell them, but they're there, and I understand the value of it because I play the game so much. But newer players, they don't see that, and they don't understand that they are sitting on so much wealth on what they've done and all their investment that they're playing the maps, even if it's not for a specific farming strategy or whatnot. Maybe they just play the game for what it is. They all can go and have some fun. They're making tons of money out of currency ores that is not normally seen as a currency ore. They're more used for specific things. Catalyst used for quality, and Essences is used for crafting, but they don't see that as potential actual value, which Exiles will help a lot with understanding and seeing as well. So that's definitely something I'll personally be looking into, and that's because most of my mods have been on my ass about that for several months now.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, the number one reason is not even just because obviously, as you know, more veteran players, why when you go in an essence map, you're putting 2C on your map device to get the essences, and you're buying that metamorph scarab. You know you're going to make profit, so you don't have to look at it.
Mhm.
But the thing is, as a newer player, or somebody who doesn't necessarily know all the ins and out of the game, they know that they're investing the money, right? That metamorph scarab, or even maybe they're not doing that. They're just putting the essence on the map device or whatever it is. And they don't really see what they're getting out of it because it's in other forms than just pure currency, and they're investing pure currency, so they don't really see the returns.
Mhm.
So I think the main problem with that is not even just that they're not really making money, or that they don't see that they're making money. It's this, they get discouraged. That's probably the number one thing that I see all the time. So instead of playing the game, they end up complaining about not making currency in the game. And that's when they really start to make no currency, right? Because as long as you're actually killing monsters, no matter what you're doing, you're going to make some amount of currency here or there. It's pretty much impossible. And then, of course, when you start pairing the Atlas passives with, Xanamods and Scarabs, that's when you're really going to start to make money. As you said, you go to Hayward Hamlet, you've got essences, you got metamorph. It's really easy to do. It doesn't take much investment. I can go red maps, and I mean, it doesn't have to be red maps actually, and you'll make profit no matter what. Um, but yeah, the main reason I think people should really get on top of that excellence is to not get discouraged, because that's what I see too many times. And when you start losing the motivation to farm, and then you log in, you play for 3 hours, and you've done 6, 7 maps, that's when you're actually no longer making currency, like whatsoever. And that's kind of the biggest issue with this whole thing. I think is more a question of motivation than anything else.
Oh, for sure. Another fun thing is I made a video where back in, I think it was Harvest League actually. I created this weird scenario in Harvest League because of how easy it was to craft back then. Normally, when I have currency in my stash, I hate having currency in my stash, because the way I see it is that the less currency I have in my currency tab, the richer I am. That's usually one way I go with. So as soon as I have currency that I can invest into profit crafting, I want to invest that into profit crafting, because the way market works is that the market follows the fluctuation of the crafting materials cost to craft those items, which means that if I invest my currency into the profit crafts, which is supposed to be profitable, then my investment has always gained value when it's turned into an item. That's the purpose of profit crafting. But if it's only left to sit in my stash, then that currency will only be affected by inflation and fluctuation of the currency market, like Exalted Orbs have it. And we've seen that in a couple of past leagues of how volatile that can be sometimes. And even in those situations, the items that was crafted for it followed that trend, but was still profitable even when it fluctuated very hard. So normally I want to have as little currency as I can, because I want to put that into items where, again, like excellence and whatnot would help. And when you're flipping and stuff like that as well, it also helps those situations where market fluctuates, you still get the profit out of it, and you make your money work for you. That's why the rich gets richer. They are able to invest more into the maps to have better juiced up maps. They can craft bigger items, and the bigger the item craft is, the more access or more usage of TFT or harvest craft in general is being used to craft them, which means that they are going to increase even more in value the harder they are to craft. Because again, people might understand that it's easier to craft, but they choose not to because of the pain in the ass it is to get that crafted and all of those things, right? But it still doesn't help if you just sit around doing nothing, right? It's like the way I play has always been to invest, 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 and then because of my main profit coming from that way, what I actually do in game for actual gameplay doesn't matter. So I can just go in and I can be like, yeah, well, you know what? I want to do that map because I think that map's fun, or I want to do some bosses, even if bosses is terrible profit right now. Then I'll do
Yeah.
profit. Like I know I'm still making money. I get a little bit for the time invested. A completely stupid use of my time in terms of profit per hour. But in terms of profit per hour, I'm still making tons because of the other investments I did the 2 hours
Yeah, the
before I
other
started
investments.
mapping, right? So everyone
Yeah.
plays the game differently and have a different aspect to it. But like making money in the game has always been very easy with information and knowledge. And there are content creators like the two of us and many others that are providing so much knowledge for the community. So it's already
Oh, yeah.
available for everyone to just soak in and understand it. It's just about the will to take the time to actually sit there and learn. Because there is a lot to learn in Path of Exile. It is a very complex game in the end. I mean,
Oh, yeah, that it is. I mean, there's a couple of rules of thumb that I would go out and say to people who are looking to get into crafting and stuff. Rule of thumb number one for me is never put more than 40% of your net worth in a single item. Say you have 10x, I would never craft any item more than 4x. Because let's say you have 10x and you invest 8x into your item, then until that, and you're not going to use it, right? It's for profit. Well, until that item sells, you have only 2x to play with, which means you can't really craft anything else. So I would never put more than 40% of my available currency into a single item. That's one of my rules when it comes to crafting or flipping. It's the same thing for flipping. I would never buy an item that's more than 4x if I have 10x in my stash, because again, until that sells, I have very little to play around with. Because if you buy two 4x items and then a 2x item and then you have no currency left, no matter if it's flipping or crafting, whatever it is, then you're kind of just sitting there like, what do I do? Right? I can't do anything. I can't even map. I've got literally no currency. So that's one of my rule of thumb. But otherwise, I do think that diversifying is a good idea because kind of like you said, sitting currency is currency that's basically rotten away. It's kind of like having money in your bank account. It's in the real world. I mean, inflation is basically going to eat away at your net worth every year, right? And it's the same thing in PoE. Inflation is basically going to eat away at your value every day, right? Bring it from a yearly to a daily basis, but it's the same concept. Because the one currency that typically only ever goes up is mirrors, but the vast majority of players don't think in mirrors. They think in exalts or they think in chaos, right? So because they think in exiles and they think in chaos, that means that mirrors are probably not something that's even remotely affordable or possible as an investment. But any sort of stack of exalt is basically losing currency daily because mirrors are pretty much going up in price almost every single day in a given league. Now it can stay stable for a few days, but then there'll be a spike and then stable and a spike, and it'll happen. But it'll only ever go up because mirrors start around 60x or so at the very beginning of league, 50, 60x, and they have to end up around the price of standard, right? Because they're going to standard. And mirrors in standard about 800. So we've got 90 days in the league. So it needs to go from 100 or say 50 to 800. That progression has to happen. So it needs to go up eventually, and it does. So that's the only currency that doesn't really lose value. But even sitting on mirrors is typically not a good thing. You only should really be sitting on mirrors if you have enough currency to basically either flip them so you can afford one and you also have one. But that's like that's like 99.9% of people who are hearing this right now are never going to be there, right? The majority of people are not going to be there. So just stop thinking about the exalt and stop thinking about the chaos and start looking at the bigger picture. And any sort of currency that's sitting in your stash is basically rotting away. You should be investing it. That could be investing it into something that's going to turn a dividends quickly or slowly. Put it this way: say you're farming nurse cards, right? You're thinking, oh, I'm going to sell these nurses. I'm going to sell these nurses so I can basically just see the Exile in my stash go up. Well, what you could do instead is keep those nurses, and when you have 8 of them, turn it into a doctor, and when you have 8 doctors, turn that into a headhunter, and then sell the headhunter instead. All of a sudden, instead of selling those nurses 1.5x at a time, whatever, and getting 90x for a headhunter or whatever it is, you'll get like 100, 110. So you'll basically have flipped it by just not touching it. Uh, and those that applies to basically anything, but mostly crafting. The problem with I think with crafting is that most people don't want to do it, right?
No.
Because as you said, it's a pain in the ass. But what they should really do is take that nurse card, sell it, and then invest that currency into something that's actually going to be worth more over time. The downside of that, or something that can even net them even more profit on their investment. But yeah, the downside is that crafting is very knowledge based and also very time consuming. And not only is it time consuming to learn to craft and to then craft, but it's also time consuming to sell the craft. Right? If you're only available 2 hours a day, it's a lot harder to sell big ticket items because that's you're only available in a very short window of time, and any other time that you're not there, well, your item is basically not for sale. So you're cutting your ability to sell big ticket items as if you're not online a lot, which I think is another problem with crafting big ticket items.
No, I think that's fair. Like the amount of hours that you as a gamer put into the game is willing to, or have the interest to, or even the possibility to, dictates the options you have in the game to make currency. That's why we have the simple things such as the essence blight thing. Sorry, metamorph blight thing. Sorry, metamorphed essence thing, where it's like it's
Yeah.
very low investment. Everyone can afford it by running. You can literally do Blood Aqueduct for half an hour to have enough chaos recipes to start doing it, right? And then you can sell those to buy orders, and you still make money out of it. Like it's so easy to do. You can do that no matter how few hours a day you play. So there's always ways for you to make money, no matter how many hours you do. Obviously, the fewer hours you put in the game, the lower currency per hour strategies you have access to. And the big problem with that is that if you play so few hours that you're not able to put things up to reliably sell them, you're going to have to sell them either in an undercut bulk state, because that usually goes very quickly, or you have to sell it to buyers upon which you're already losing a lot of potential profit out of the items you're selling, and that's perfectly fine. You're still making money. That's like the big thing there. As long as you're making profit, you're fine. And then you have the aspect with people like us who plays an obnoxiously unhealthy amount of hours every league, and like it doesn't really matter. I can profit craft an item on league start or whatever, and I'll be live for the next 25 hours. I know I'm gonna be there. Or if you're playing in a team, like for example, I play with two other people, one of my mods, Cock and Anter. So when I'm not online and I'm about to log off, maybe for a sponsor stream or whatever, or if I'm just gonna go to bed, I can literally ship off all my big ticket items to one of the other guys who I know is going to be live for the next or online for the next 10 hours. And they have them up for sale till I come back and then they ship them back. And that's just team play. And that's something I used to do when Andrew lived in the States. He was always online when I was sleeping. So whenever we had items for sale, we just cycled them between one another. So we always kept our items up for sale. And it was super effective for making selling big ticket items because our items were literally always online. But he moved back to the Europe, so what we did instead is that we have a guy who provides a service that as a seller, and you can actually find these people quite often. They take a percent cut of the things you sell, but they make sure that they sell them for you. And what they do is they make sure that they're online for as many hours, if not 24/7, to have those items up for sale. And they take a cut from everything sold because of this. There are these services being available, and they're actually really comfortable to use. You'll lose a little bit of profit in the end game, but you still make money out of it, and you still have the possibility to sell them in a better way. But I mean, we're talking about like getting in contact with these type of people that runs this service, obviously, so it's a bit of more advanced, and not everyone likes that or feels comfortable with it, of course. But the bottom line being is that your amount of hours that you play the game dictates how much money you can make, and you can't play 2 hours a day, times a week, and then complain that you're not getting 1,000x a league, because that's going to be very hard without some insane lucky drops or crafts by just playing 2 hours a day, right? But if you're playing 10 hours a day, 6 times a week, then suddenly, based on your knowledge and experience that you're putting into the game, you can easily achieve these numbers by just putting yourself into it and having the discipline and patience to learn these things and adapt to it and utilize that information into the game later. But definitely what you said, Beth, as well, with the idea of having um, profit coming from being able to have the item up for sale. If you're not online, your item's not for sale. It's not there until you come back online. That's a big factor in terms of those, especially for profit crafting and flips and bigger bulks, for example.
Yeah, which is why it doesn't really apply to a lot of people, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the downside when you're talking about those really end game strategies, be it crafting or even to some extent like the super end game bossing. A lot of the time, because there's such big ticket items, and you need to be there like all the time to be able to sell them. Which I think is definitely like, I mean, it's a problem to some extent, but at the same time, it's a problem that doesn't have a solution, right? Like this game is unfortunately not for casuals, but the more hours you can put into it, the more you're going to get out of the game. But I mean, I guess that applies to just about everything in life. So it's only fair. It does kind of suck because it does mean that some players will probably never experience certain things because of their casual status or whatever. But I mean, at some point, like you mentioned before we got into that whole tack, as long as you're making some currency, even if it's fairly small amount, uh, profit is profit.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Um, Looks like Path got a little bit distracted there. So I mean, what he's talking about is like the whole idea of the profit being profit and being able to invest the time that you need to the game. It's like I saw in the chat earlier where someone saying, "Oh, I ran at five tower maps and didn't drop a single nurse," and saying, "Oh, the strategy it sucks." I mean, it's all about making sure it's common, right? It's
Yeah.
common, and it's all about being patient. And as long like something I like is doing a strategy or that I know that no matter what I do, I am profiting on this. As long as I know that, I can just dig myself, put my head down in the ground and just keep doing it because I know I'll end up being, making more currency out of it. There was another question in the chat saying, Path of Matth Ghazzy, have you considered looking at complete bills as if they were currency? And I think that's a really common, really interesting question because there is a market actually very easily held by TFT again, where you're actually able to sell your builds. It's a little bit easier for streamers because we can sell it to our viewers, but we can also post it on TFT like everyone else. And there's an entire channel in there that people post their PUBs and then entire characters, and basically they sell the characters as a package deal where they basically price all of their items and then they add a little bit of extra percent on top of that for selling the entire bulk deal, right? For it being a functional character. But you sold one of your characters, your Gen Cry, right? Recently?
Yeah, I sold my General Cry because I wasn't going to be playing it since I knew I was going into the Zero to Hero series and also BPL. So I figured why let it rot? It's a really cool character, so I'm just going to sell it. But I sold it to a viewer, a friend of mine, I guess you could say, someone who's been around for in my community for a long time. So I gave him a bro deal. I didn't really look at all the value too much. I just kind of gave him a price, which I thought was pretty fair.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I did the same with the Meixsell build, and also did the opposite. Instead of adding some percent cost to it, we actually gave a discount just so we didn't have to sell it piece by
Yeah.
piece. We could have made maybe 50, 60x more out of it, but we ended up, giving a cut deal out of it instead. So we could just sell all of it in a bulk, and then we utilize that currency to make more currency. But yeah, no, for sure. So the question was if we look at complete bills as if they were currency. Absolutely, I do all the time. I mean, my dark pack build, if I were to sell that, I can easily squeeze out 850x out of it. Same thing with the absolution. That's like 350, 400x. I look at them as currency. That's the currency I've invested
Boy,
and what they're worth.
you have to. I mean, to some extent, I love it when I do these zero to hero challenges and say I end up with some craft or something that I made, and I have no currency in my stash left because I've been reinvested it, and then I make a video like how I made X amount of currency or whatever. Because obviously that's the whole point of doing like daily updates for the Zero to Hero series. And then people are like, well, it's not sold, it's not money. But it's like, yo, do you own a house? Like what do you is the value of your house, of your property, of your car, of your clothing, of anything that you own not worth anything because it's not sold? Like you can't look at it that way. Because if you looked at it that way, all the richest people in the world basically are poor. Because majority of them don't hold any currency. They hold stocks, they hold property, they hold, you know, things, because the value of money only ever really depreciates over time. So it's not a good investment. It's the same thing in the game. Like, you really don't want to just be holding on to a stack of Exile just for the sake of that, unless you're looking forward to buying an upgrade that will require that stack of currency to be there. But yeah, I see that all the time, way too much. Like, people who just are like, well, if it's not sold, it's not currency. But it's like, well, if it's properly priced, it will sell eventually, and if it will sell eventually at that proper price, it's worth that much, right? It's not worth what I think it's worth, and it's not worth what I'm just gonna say it's worth. It's worth whatever it's actually worth, right? So you see it all the times. I guess to some extent that does come from people like overpricing items due to the fact that they're, a streamer or something like that, or a content creator. Um, we're not going to name any names here, but there's definitely some content creators that will inflate the living crap out of their build values just for the sake of, well, making currency. But in reality, as a regular player, as long as your item is properly priced, it will sell. Everything sells in this game. If it's properly priced, it will sell. So if you have an item sitting in your stash, and this is a lesson that you guys can take home. If you have an item sitting in your stash for more than a day or two, you should probably think about repricing it, because everything sells in this game if it's properly priced.
Yeah.
Even big tickets thing. Like, I mean, the bigger the ticket the item, the longer it takes to sell. But even 100x items typically sell within 48-hour time frame if priced properly.
Yep. I think that the price point, at least in the current league, seems to be between 150 and 200x before it starts to take a longer time to sell. And then you have the niche approaches. I know, like DP builds, for example, like the big ticket items there are worth a shitload of currency, but they usually take 4, 5, sometimes 6 days to sell. But the problem is that there's almost no competition, so there's no reason to lower
Yeah.
them. So there's the other aspect of it. But like that's for the niche builds. There was another question I thought was interesting from the chat. Path, if you see anything in the chat, just feel free to pick it out. There was a question about build diversity. He said something about with the build diversity affecting the market. With now, how do you feel the build diversity affects the market? For example, this league compared to say Ritual. And I mean, build diversity always affects the market heavily. But I think that honestly, we have a much bigger build diversity this league than we've had in a very long time. I think that the build diversity now is way better than we had in Ritual, even if the meta is more pressing in this than it was in Ritual, with the toxic rain spammage and the magic find pushing, for example. It's more distinct than it was in Ritual, but we have a larger build variety this league than we've had in a very long time. And a lot of people think that they have this misconception that the build variety is very low this league, which is not even close to reality. We have so many builds being played right now, and they all function. You don't even need to invest a lot of currency to make them work. It's crazy how good it is. But yes, to go back to the question, build diversity, it definitely affects the market, especially when something's meta. Ritual, we had a lot
Yeah,
of
I
minion
mean,
meta, for example.
the meta dictates price 100%.
Yeah, for sure. And it also dictates the not just the price, but also the supply, right? Because everybody wants to make currency profit crafting, and one
Yeah,
of the best
yeah.
ways to profit craft is craft things for thumbs for a build is mostly used by most people. So crafting for the meta builds means your items will cycle much faster. Your items will cycle much faster, allowing you to profit craft for them. So if you find something that has a low craft cost compared to the worst sellable outcome, that's going to sell almost immediately. An example of this, I think it was actually in Ritual League, was or which league was it with the Spectral Shield throw? Was that Ritual?
Last league
It was
was
last league, yeah.
Expedition.
So the runic hatchets, for example, they cost like 1.5 extra craft, sold for 5. That the worst, absolute disgustingest, worst shit was 5x. Decent outcomes between 8 and 12x, and the big ticket for 20. Then myself and a couple of others made some videos on it, and it was Then we made 50C per item instead. But it's like that's an
Yep.
example of like a meta build allowing you to make a lot of money of it, but it also means that the not just the supply is higher, but also the demand is way higher as well. And the problem with those situations, like we mentioned earlier in this podcast, was that the problem is when people start flooding the market, and when the market gets flooded, it's profitable for a little bit longer, and then it just completely plummets down to being profitable still, but only in the terms of scraps. And in worst case scenarios, the profit turns into the situation where the worst sellable outcome is no longer profitable, and you would only profit on the bigger ticket versions. And that's the situation where you're only really making currency when you decide to craft the item for yourself rather than buying your upgrade. And if you hit a big ticket item, you'll just sell it. And if you hit a
Yeah.
bad one, you will just use it, and you just overpaid for your worst upgrade, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, whenever something is really, really meta, typically it's going to move a lot faster. But things that move a lot quicker are typically going to move at a lesser profit margin.
Yeah.
Uh, where you're going to make the most money on an item that you craft or flip or whatever is typically for niche builds because there is no supply. So you kind of dictate the supply if you have it, and therefore you get to put whatever price you want. Problem is, there's no demand either because it's niche, right? Or there's little demand, so things take longer to sell. But those are going to be uh, your bigger return of investments. But typically, the go to is just to craft for the meta because you're going to make more crafting 50 items at 1x profit each than one item at 30x profit or even 40x profit each, right? And that's just a worst case scenario. Typically, if you're actually crafting items, as long as there's some sort of Awakener's Orb or Maven Orb or some sort of reforging involved, you're going to make more than 1x profit because your time is valuable. And that kind of you'll see that in the value of the items. Um, so typically, I would always go for meta. I very rarely, unless I'm playing a niche build myself, and then I want to craft for myself. But otherwise, I pretty much just if I'm crafting and my goal is to make profit, I'll look at literally the top three builds and I'm going to spam items for them. Now the downside is that sometimes those top three builds mostly only ever use uniques, and that can definitely be a bit problematic. But there's pretty much always going to be things to craft. Like this league, it's all about magic finding is really big right now. So crafting, like for example, the Blizzard crowns with +2 lightning arrows, you can make a ton of currency doing that. You could also right now strike skills are really good. Things like Frostblade, things like lightning strike, etc. So the +2 strike gloves with intimidate or whatever they want. There's a lot of money to be made there as well. Boots are always going to be really good as long as they're double elevated because there's only so many that can exist, right? So typically they're always really really good. I made a pair this league. I made a single pair, and I got T2 decks on them. Cost me 22x total to make them. Sold them for over 60 plus in my package, and they were worth about 90. So like there's a lot of money to be made in a lot of different things. Again, the downside is really just that, well, obviously you need to have the starting currency and you need to have the knowledge. But the upside is that I don't know if you saw this. I'm sure you saw this. Craft of Exile came out with a new affinities thingy, and that is a game changer in the profit crafting field. I mean, it's insane what they did. So I think that is basically you don't even really need knowledge anymore. There's so many like you don't even need time anymore, I should say, or investment of time into learning to do these things because we have so many tools nowadays that basically just feed you the information right then and there. We have Elishar's crafting document. Um, Absolutely massive value there in terms of learning to craft. And then the new affinity system is like, I think that's the one thing that is, you can't beat it. It's just so crazy.
Yeah, I think that's really good as well. Somebody mentioned in the questions that we talked about before with the commitment of time. He said, "Is it worth to play the game then if you cannot commit enough time to the game? What is the breaking point in your opinion?" And I think that that question, I understand where it's coming from, but something that I think a lot of people need to realize, especially in an ARPG game, is that it is in the end, this is a game and it's
Yep,
only worth it if you're having fun.
exactly.
If you're not
Yeah.
having fun, you shouldn't invest more time expecting you to have more fun. People like me and Path, we find enjoyment from different things that you do. May it be making currency, may it be creating guides or playing different builds. I mean, you're doing Zero to Hero projects right now, so you sold off your big
Yep.
boy character and be like, okay, I'm just gonna go back to the roots and play Zero to Hero projects. I did that lastly. I gave away everything in my stash. I was like, I want to be broke and I want to league start scenario mid league and just do Zero to Hero
Yep.
projects. And I had a lot of fun with that. And everything I had done before that, all the countless of hours I spent making currency, I was like, yeah, I just gave it away. I don't care anymore because I'm not having fun with it, and I needed a change. So I just decided to do this instead because I had fun with it. If you are only able to invest, say, 2 hours, so say 10 hours a week playing the game, then well, yeah. If you're having fun playing the 10 hours a week, then that's great. Just play, make sure that whatever you do in the game is something you have fun with. That's why I do profit crafting, because then I don't have to feel forced in what map I have to run. Like I raced in hardcore 5 years straight, doing thousands upon thousands of underground sea maps, and it was painfully annoying. So now that I'm not doing that anymore, I want to stay away from running the same map over and over again because I'm so tired of it. So now I'm doing profit crafting because then that allows me to, when I do gameplay, when I play my character, I can do whichever map I do. I can do exactly whatever I want, and I know I'll still make money because I don't have to think about it. And that's why I'm playing that way. Now, this league I have been doing quite a few alleyways maps personally, and I'm enjoying it. And that's probably because I haven't done the same map over and over again for several years now. And it's just all about making sure that you play the game in a way that you find entertaining, and because it is in the end a game. A lot of people are just tunnel visioning this whole idea with they have to play the best build or they can't do shit, and that's not true. Not even close.
Yeah. No, I mean, your time investment is, I mean, it's a hobby for most people. For us, for people like us, it's a job, right? So whether we like it or not, we've got to find something to do. We've got to find content. We've got to. So it's different. But for the guy who plays 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, whatever, how much you play, for you, it's a hobby, and you could be playing anything else, right?
Mhm.
So if you're choosing to play Path of Exile, then it's probably because you enjoy the game. But if you ever stop enjoying the game, or if it ever feels like a chore, then log off and go play something else. Because in the end, at the end of the day, you're not getting anything out of it. You're not getting paid to play. You're not. It's not. It's a hobby, right? You could be doing literally anything else. So if you're not having fun, the very it all comes down to don't play. It's that simple, right? People tell me that all the time. They'll come to my stream like, "Yeah, I'm not really having fun. What should I do?" Play something else, man.
Yeah,
What are you doing, right? It's you're wasting precious time of your life. Like you have a 40-hour job, right? You have a full-time job. You only have so much time to do whatever you enjoy because you're probably not a huge fan of your job. Most people aren't. So make sure that when you do get home after that, that 8 hour, that 9 to 5, you have fun, right? You enjoy whatever how much hours left you have of your day. So I mean, of course, there are some builds that maybe you're not having fun with the build, and then of course just play another build. But if the game itself is not providing you with fun and entertainment, then yeah, it's probably a good idea to think about playing something else for a bit,
for sure. I mean,
isn't it?
that goes for us streamers as well. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
knows what's happening in the last couple of weeks of a league. The most of us, we abandon ship and we say we are done with you. We touch it every now and
Yep.
then, and we play something else. And we do that for
Yeah,
other
for sure.
reasons, which is more to do with burnout. But it's the same process. Like we're done. Okay, there's nothing left to do. Obviously, there for a content creator perspective, there's plenty for us to do, and we stick to it because of that. But at the last few weeks of a league, I think I speak for most of us streamers that we're not having as much fun as we did in the start of a league. Even if we sit in a situation where there's a lot of us to do from a content creator perspective, we are more inclined to do other things because that's fun. And in the end, it's like you say, Path, like, you only have so many hours to put into gaming, and you just want to make sure that game is fun for you, and that's what you should focus on. Just make sure it's fun. It's not a
Yeah, I
job.
mean, I was playing my General Cry character. I was a blast on it, but I did over 1,000 Cyrus and Maven kills in just over about a week and a half or so. And I was just like, okay, well, I mean, this is getting boring. So it's time to go, right? So that's why I decided to still have the build, do a zero to hero, because I really liked starting with nothing. That's kind of like one of my favorite things is a league start scenario when you have nothing and everybody else has nothing. Now, when you do this sort of scenario in the middle of the league, it's a different story because people have things, right? You have nothing, but people have things. But there are some upsides and some downsides of that. Typically, upside number one is that everything's cheap, super cheap. Building a really, really good character is going to cost you less than an Exile, right?
Mhm.
So the downside is that everything that you farm is also super cheap. So
Yeah.
making currency is a little bit harder too. But again, the game is not really about currency; it's about having fun. You could be farming towers and making however much exile per hour, but if you're not having fun, then you should probably be doing something else. And I mean, we can't repeat it enough, really. And we sound like broken records when you say that, but the reality is that it is a game. So you do need to enjoy, you do need to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, then you should absolutely be playing something else. Um, but yeah, you got to find what's fun, and I think that's a really good point right now. Is that there are so many things to do in Path of Exile, and man, that is really I love it. The game hasn't felt like that to me in a long time, and I'm excited because it feels like I can do so many different things, and they're all good to some extent. Right, like I can go farm essences and metamorph and haywork, and or do some harvest, right? Just spam maps and just look for harvest. I can go for some juicy Nemesis 3 in Glennacarns with the Abyss nodes and the Beyond nodes. I can go to Lyra to farm some expedition logbooks and some coinages and all that. Farm some, well, try my luck with Gwen and rerolls on a Mage Blood or something. I can go farm some Blighted maps up in Valdos. I can go farm some uh, the Harbinger node as well with Auspicious and Ladens and all that. I can go and do some magic find in Tower, but I can also magic find down in Tropical Island. I can also kill. I can also do some bossing. I can. There's so many things to do right now. Some scourge maps. There's just so much to do, and it's really cool. That's like my favorite thing in the game right now because it doesn't feel like I'm logging in to do the same thing over and over again. It feels like I could literally spend 3 days doing something like intensively, and then another third thing doing another thing that makes me feel like I'm playing a different game almost, right? Like when depending what, sure, you might be playing the same character, but depending what you're farming and your strategy and all that, bossing feels like you're playing a completely different game than zooming through maps. And scourge map feel like you're playing a completely different game than say, farming Cyrus or Maven or even just magic finding and stuff like that. So there's a lot to do. There's also simulacrums, right? There's all the new Uber content, flawless breach stones. There's just so much, and that's my favorite thing right now. There's so much. There's so many things to do.
And I think that like this list of things like you mentioning that I think that's one of the best part, at least for us streamers. Like there's so much
Oh
for
yeah.
us to do, but it also goes hand in hand with the fact that there is such an insane amount of variety going on. It's not.
Yep.
It's like it's not just what we can do; it's how we can do it and with what we can do it with. And it's just beautiful right now. And then we see people on Reddit and on social media that were like, "Oh, build the variety sucks this league." I'm like, "What the hell are you on about? We haven't had this good build variety. And I don't know. Last time we had this,
Oh yeah. It's been
uh,
a while.
I don't know, 3.4 or something, 3.5 maybe. I mean, it's been years since
Probably
we had
harvest,
this.
I guess,
Yeah, maybe
because
harvest
everything worked
actually.
in harvest.
That's
Yeah.
true.
I mean, there's ritual too, where we also had harvest, but I think the ritual thing is like everybody was playing like self curse, doing 100% deli maps, and it was kind
Yeah.
of like you. There's been so many leagues where you kind of feel like there's this one thing, especially as a content creator, with the pressure of like, well, as a currency person, like myself, you kind of always have this kind of like pressure of doing whatever is the best thing. But the thing is, right now, there's so many of the best things to do that are all super good for currency per hour. So it's nice not to be pigeonholed into one strategy or one thing to farm because anything else you're doing is no good, right? So that's just nice. I can be like, you know what? I want a magic find, and I'll still make good money. And then I can be like, you know what? I'll just go kill bosses. I'll still make good money. And then I can do Nem 3 with a Zoomer character. I'll still make currency. I can go farm some Alcan Go maps, and I'll still make some pretty decent money because everybody, strafed away from those things like metamorph and essences, and because of that, the profit margin actually went back up. So there's the blight maps, there's blight ravage maps, there's really just so many different things, and it seems like no matter what you're doing, as long as you're doing something, you're making quite a bit of currency. There's just so much. So again, yeah, for me, this is a league where we're over a month in. Normally, I'd be starting to think about, okay, uh, pretty bored now. Time to go play some CS. Time to go play this. Time to go play that. I'm not. I'm literally waking up every day. I'm like Path of Exile. I'm going to bed at night. I'm going Path of Exile. Right. I'm gonna have to stop myself so that prevent burnout. And obviously, next league is going to be a big one. This is going to be a new boss, right? Always a new end game boss coming out for the December league or January, I guess. Um, but it's so I'm gonna have to put the brakes on. But yeah, no, there's just so many things to do. It's a lot of fun.
I absolutely love it. I started the initial time. I started with the Zero to Hero project. I did a Holy Relic, and I did the Dominating Blow, and then I did your Eye of Winter build, which I was really pleasantly surprised with how effective it was from start to finish in a Zero to Hero situation. And that's like one of
Oh
those
yeah.
things. Like that's just another thing for me to do and have fun with, and I enjoy that. I played several days with that, and we ended up after we spoke about it, I ended up making the written guide for that. I'm actually looking at your seismic trap build and thinking about doing something similar with that in the coming weeks or something to try that out as a Zero to Hero project. Did you ever do that Zero to Hero project with that build specifically?
Yeah, I just finished one. I did a bossing one. So day one, kind of just got to maps, got a little tabula going, whatever, whatever. Day two, pretty much had the full set of gear with the CI. Like you pretty much just need cold iron points.
Hmm.
And like I had a +2 carcass jack because they're so cheap this league, right? It's like 1x to make a +2 carcass jack. It's ridiculous
Jesus.
because of tainted currencies, right? Tainted
Yeah.
fusings, tainted jewelers. Extremely, extremely cheap. But you could also even just go with a +2 tabula or even just a regular tabula. And then day three, I started doing guardian maps. So I was doing basically the four guardians into the invitation, and I was buying the Guardian maps. Now strategy died, obviously,
Hmm.
because I made videos about it. But it can be applied to other things, uh, and it's probably also going to reset itself within probably a week or so when people forget about it. People forget about things really quickly. But I was buying the Guardian maps for initially 12 to 15C. By the end of it, more like 18 to 20C each. And the fragments, the shaper fragments were going for about 15C each in bulk. So the fragments were basically more than paying for the map because of the node Guardian's Aid. You get like 1.5 fragment per map.
Mm.
So I was basically making profit every single map. And then about 60% of the time, you'll self sustain the invitation, the formed, and then the other you have to buy it. But in the end, it was about a 4 to 5x profit per hour. It took 37 hours from making the brand new account, new character with nothing to a headhunter, which is obviously not like a world record or anything like that. 37 hours is quite a bit of time invested, but at the same time, headhunters are really expensive this league. It's been a while since I've seen headhunters over 100x. So pretty expensive headhunters, and of course, I made the video the first day, and then or the first day I started farming the strategy, the price of the maps just started rising. Price of the invitation started rising. Everything started going up, and the price of shaper sets started going down. So it was just harder and harder on myself. But initially, it was like 6x an hour. It's pretty crazy.
Mm.
And the seismic trapper build was just plowing through the content like crazy. It was really, really good build. I
That's
mean,
nice.
I can't believe they didn't nerf it. I mean, I don't know if you caught up on BPL at all, but people did Wave 30 simulacrums within like 30 hours of the league or some shit. Like, it's crazy.
Jesus.
Seismic is just bust. Obviously, that's team settings, so they're getting fed all the gear and all the stuff. But
Yeah.
still, the first Awakener 8 Cyrus was killed within 7 hours of the start of the league.
Yeah. It's
So
pretty
7 hours
nuts.
for Awakener 8. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
disgusting.
started BPL on the Friday. It was I got my second vaccine shot. We talked about that before the
Ah, yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I got my headache around I think it was around midnight or something, CET, and I just had to call it, and then I was gone the entire day yesterday. And well, I've been sweating all day from the bouncing up and down fever, but it's getting better. The last couple of hours have been starting to
Yeah.
feel better. So I actually stopped BPL because I didn't want to feel like I was just there to get a decent level for the team. I was like, okay, I'm not. That's the only thing I'm gonna have time for. I'm just gonna say no. I'm gonna play the Scourge League instead and do things that can progress content and have some fun instead. Since I got so sick from the vaccine shot. But that's it.
BPL highly recommend. It's a really fun event. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I haven't really participated too much in the last ones due to time constraints and stuff like that. But this one I decided to play a little bit, and yeah, I played the first 2 days, and it was a blast. I got to my Awakener 8 Cyrus. I did a few Cyrus carries for the team. It's really cool because I think the one of the thing about PoE is it's a super selfish game, right? You're only playing for yourself, your own builds, your own currency, your own upgrades, and your own progression. And being in a team setting kind of like shifts that mentality to playing for the bigger picture. So, for example, like I was my character was Omega struggling, and I was still giving pretty much every single upgrade I was getting to the team, like to anybody else who needed them, because I knew like there's no reason for me to put a couple upgrades when I'm not the one who's going to be doing the hardest content anyways. Like we already have a dedicated bosser. So I rather just struggle through my maps, and then every single time I get something that could be useful for someone else, I give it away. And it's really nice to feel like you're playing for something a little bit bigger than just yourself. So I had a really fun time with BPL. Highly recommend. If you've never been part of a BPL, anyone watching this, sign up for the next one. It's a really fun event.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that as well. Like just like Pat said, just if you get the chance to do it, it's puts you on a whole different perspective in playing the game, and it puts a different level of enjoyment in it. This whole teamwork thing, like just from going from solo playing to playing with your best friend or playing with someone you play place a lot, and just having a two-man team that's different as well. Like I've the last couple of years I've been playing with one of my mods, and we weaved in another one player called Anter, and it's the three of us, just the way we play. We barely do content together, just like in BPL. It's very rare that you would do content together, but you're working together, maybe for crafting or making currency or achieving certain goals and whatnot. We just work together as a goal, and just makes the game way more fun that way. But I mean, if your personal goals doesn't fit the idea of playing a team, then obviously you shouldn't. And then vice versa, of course. A BPL just puts in a whole different perspective where it's not just you and a friend or two other friends or whatever. It's like you have 600 people in your team. It's literally 600 people, and you're there to get points to make sure your team wins over the other two teams. I think that Badger's really outdone himself with the VPL events lately, and they've just been improving in quality every time they've done it. So it's a really cool event. Definitely can recommend checking it out if you guys haven't. It's still going on right now. People doing some pretty crazy shit in there. So definitely can recommend check that out.
Saw one question in chat here says, "What do you guys think is the most important thing that PoE still needs to improve on?" And I think a lot of people have been praising GGG. I've been praising GGG a whole lot. As someone who's typically known as hypercritical of them, I've been praising them a whole lot this league. I think they did a lot of things right, but no, there's still some problems with the game. Uh, there's still some pretty big problems. I think the main problem right now is the state of trading. Obviously, we have a lot of like third party programs that are always coming up here and there to try to help us with that. But yeah, trading is still really annoying. But I mean, we that's not really a discussion that really needs to be had anymore because we have the definitive answer from GGG, and it's well, we're not doing anything about trading for the time being because we're working on PoE 2, and if we were to rework the trading system, we got to work it from the ground up, and we don't think it's worth it. They said maybe we'll embed the trading website inside the game, but apparently the coding is just kind of spaghetti. So doing that would also require a lot of resources. And again, they're just not willing to put the resources in. So I think that's probably my main problem with PoE right now is trading sucks. You could easily try to buy an Exile and you PM 25 people. What the fuck? Does anyone even have Exiles? Is anyone selling it? Why are they there? What's the point?
16
And
months
that
of
goes for
awesome
everything.
music and
You try to
memes.
buy Sextant, you try to buy Scarabs, you try to buy anything, and it's just a pure pain. I don't agree personally with an auction house in the game because I do think that bots already control a big portion right now of bulk trading and currency trading. And then they would be able to control a big portion, if not all, of everything like perfect uniques, good rares. Like they would control much more. But I do, to some extent, agree with, say, having some sort of auction house for only consumables, things like scarabs, because they're so annoying to buy. Things like fragments for bossing, things like sextants, currency, etc. Some sort of trading platform that is a little bit quicker and automated for that would be good. But that's kind of the extent. I really don't think having an auction house for like rare items and uniques would be a good idea.
Yeah, we had that in the interview I did on the stream with Chris Wilson, and it was the same thing there. It's like no matter how they did it, it was the answer was just no, 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 no. They think their
Yeah,
trading is at a good spot. I'm actually
it's not.
surprised that you express yourself in not such a blunt way that you normally do
What do you mean?
when it comes to being negative to PoE. You have a tendency of like being rather blunt in your approach to when you criticize GGT in some cases, which we talked about in the past. Doesn't mean that you're not saying the truth or is accurate in your statement. That's always so hilarious in my opinion, because I'm gonna be that person now, and I'm gonna be blunt.
Go for it.
Um, my biggest problem with PoE is transparency. They are being praised a lot with being transparent, and then they're making tons of changes that are not documented. They don't show it to us, and this is a big problem with minions. They've changed the way
Oh,
chieftains works. You don't need life tap with them because they removed the mana cost from them. Instead, it's a cast with a cooldown war cry instead, which is a huge problem because minions are normally socket starved. This is not documented anywhere. We stumble upon this and then spent hours upon hours testing to confirm this. And then we spread this information, and still majority of content creators making guides for summoners still uses life tap support to these minions when they don't need it. And this is because GGG hasn't given us the information and been transparent with it. They made AI problematic changes with aggressive minions such as slave drivers, causing big issues. And when I've approached them with this, they basically told me that, oh, we think specters are strong as it is, so they'll be fine. And well, they are, but they still have AI problems, which is a bug which they're not recognizing or doing anything about, which is a change that was not documented. So all these things were like, transparency is like so terrible. It's always been great, but lately it's just been terrible. Like absolutely terrible.
hmm. Do you think that was due to the fact that the patch notes were like 14,000 words and they're like, yeah, we'll skip that?
I don't know if that's the case, but like minion transparency has always been troublesome. I remember having a discussion before the interview with Chris where I complained about not having the numerical values on Absolution and Reaper, which is new, which is something I've been moaning and bitching about for 6 years. And Chris did tell me that next time they're introducing a new minion, they were going to make sure that we get the information out before the league starts. So he's already reassured me that that's going to be taken care of for the next time, which is fine and
Good.
glad to happen. And after 7 years of playing, well, almost 8 years, but after 6, 7 years of bitching about it, I'm happy that it's happening, right? And then at the same time, the patch included, undocumented changes to crucial things such as, not needing a support gem for something that is crucial for a build that is extremely soccer starred already. I don't know. It just kind of pisses me off because I'm with you for the most part with the idea of praising GGG. I think that they've done a really good job for the most part with this league.
Yeah.
Yes, there are definitely problems. I agree with the trading problems, which they have said they're not going to do anything about. But this whole thing with being praised for transparency and then, giving us this shit, and I guess I react harder to it because of my profound passion for minions in general in this game.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, I don't know what to
Well, I
say.
mean, I can actually see this transparency issue in other places because I don't give a damn about minions.
Yeah.
But I do care about a lot about trading, and another thing that they haven't been transparent about whatsoever is things in relation to the API. They're constantly changing the rules of the API. The amount of trades you can, or like the amount of live searches you can have, the amount of like how fast you can live search different items, or how fast you can do a given amount of search in a given amount of time before it just locks you out, right? At the limit, or what's it called again? Something limit, whatever.
Yeah, I've seen that on Welcome
They haven't,
Patriot.
yeah, they haven't been transparent about those. You have to be on the developer side of things to see all the actual limits, and I haven't seen anything about that in the patch notes. I don't know if you remember that we used to have up to 80 live searches, right, per person, and then all of a sudden they cut that down by 4. Now it's 20. And it was never in a patch notes. It was never discussed. It was never anything like that. It was just like, yeah, this is just how it is now. If you had 80 live searches, you tried to live search after 20, it would just wouldn't let you anymore. And after that, they started cutting down on filters. And again, this is not something that was ever documented. We used to be able to make filters with a ridiculous amount. I don't know if you remember this tool called, what is it called? Pulse something, volatile pulse. You remember that?
No, I do
This
remember you
tool
talking about
for
it when we talked before
for
about live searches and whatnot, how you did with your flipping strategy in the early league starts, right?
No, no, volatile pulse. I think that's what it's called, anyways. It was a tool that would allow you to basically look at your POB, and then it would make a search for the best possible jewels for your build. But the thing is, the searches would be really, really long, and it would give like custom weightings to each mod based on your build exactly. It was incredible to find perfect jewels for any build, really. But yeah, they kind of cut down on the custom weighting of the searches. Now you can't really do much. I don't even know why they have the weighted sum in the options at all, because weighted sum is pretty useless. The moment you put like three different weighted sums together, the API is like, yeah, no, that's too complicated. I'm not going to look for it.
Hmm.
That's also never been documented. Anything in regards to trade that they cut down and limited has never been documented. And I guess that's something I kind of haven't really thought about lately, because I haven't been on the trading and flipping side of things. But going into a zero hero is definitely something I'll be reminded swiftly that I can't do what I could do in past zero to heroes. I can't live search fossils anymore, because they ding so often that they just kick you off the API. It gives you the rate limit just off of live searching a single item because it pops up too often. So it's there's a lot of limiting factors like that that weren't there in the past that are there now that are absolutely painful in the trading aspect. I don't know if that's to prevent some sort of abuse with bots and all that, but tell you what, you have to go through some crazy hoops to get to trading or sorry, to get to basically be able to live search things the way that you were able to before, or to be able to use custom weighted filters like you could before. And that's a shame, because that was really cool. I thought that it was really fun to be able to make these really, really sick filters for rare items and all that when you needed something very specific. And now it's just like it's gone. So I do agree that they could maybe give us a little bit more information when they do changes, be it in regards to minions or be it in regards to all limitations and whatnot to the API. Maybe they're not doing it uh, for a specific reason. I personally don't see it. Maybe it's something to do with like abusing the API. I have no idea, but transparency definitely, in some regards, in the game would be nice.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that being a problem. Like a lot of the problems that you're talking about with the API problems, it's something I the only way I've noticed it is from the woke PoE trade, suddenly getting locked in the case where I have to wait a minute before I can read price check, do a gamble with
Exactly,
someone your
right?
size, right?
Yep.
It's fucking annoying. But no, that's not that mentioning the patch notes either as well. I don't know. I feel like when it comes to the changes, a lot of it is like, yeah, it's okay. The patch notes were long. I understand that they only choose to mention the things that affects most people. I understand that API changes like that doesn't affect the majority of the player base. I understand that
Yeah, no.
the life tap changes for the specters doesn't affect the majority of players, but the API changes, I guess, affects fewer people, but something as big as an entire archetype of a build that is socket starved now has the possibility to save an entire socket, which is massive, not being included in the patch notes. To me, like that feels like a huge, spit in the face kind of approach, and it pisses me off. And that's why I feel so blunt when I talk about it. I can't really express myself in a good way without, throwing out a curse word or two about the topic.
No, I mean it makes sense. I mean transparency is important, right?
Yeah.
I mean it's, but at the same time, I guess they're not obligated to give us any information whatsoever. They could just release the patch and be like, "Yeah, we made a lot of changes. There's a bunch of builds that work and don't work anymore, but go figure it out." Right? They could literally do that. And there are some games that kind of do that to some extent. So it's nice that we do have patch notes and they go through the trouble of writing 14,000 words to explain all this stuff. Um, so I mean, I'm not too mad about it, but it's definitely true that there are some sort of things that are a little lacking, especially when it comes to the technical side of the game. The numbers behind it is what they typically don't want to give us,
Yeah.
and that goes for a lot of just builds in general, but also for the technical aspect of things like trading. But to some extent, I feel like it might just be that they don't know. It might just be that the code is so spaghetti that they just don't know. That's a possibility. Now, of course, uh, you know, the game has a lot going on for it, and there's a lot in the game. And if it was just a bunch of spaghetti code, it would probably be a lot worse than it really is. So I'd like to give him credit where probably it's due. I would imagine the code can't be that bad. But there are some definite changes that players are finding and reporting to GGG that GGG don't seem to know about themselves. So there's definitely some stuff going on there. Uh, all I can say, I guess, is we hope that it's not malicious, and it probably isn't. Realistically, I do think that you know GG is fairly faithful to their player base, and they want us to have the best experience possible. But they're not perfect either. I think that's kind of what it comes down to, right? Human error, and also just overlooking things. But when you're running a game that big, which is that many things, I mean, there's not that many games that are as extensive as PoE. When you have 400 different skill gems and a passive tree of like 1,000 points, you're bound to have some interactions that are just not necessarily intended or that are just unaccounted for.
No, for sure.
Especially with, yeah, there's just so much customization. There's just so many things going on. So as much as, again, as I'm typically super hypercritical, I think we do have to give credit where credit is due. A lot of things work, and the vast majority of things work. So if once in a while there's things that go through that don't work, all we can do is I guess report it and hope that they fix it.
Um, I'm gonna make it I'm gonna admit to something that I might have done. So hear me out here before you guys give me shit for it. So there's been this little topic going on for years about from Reddit side with how GGG doesn't play their own games and then they nerf and patch it and the buff things right without playing their game. So not too long ago, I had a discussion about minions with some of the top dogs in GGG, and I used the expression "the bugged syndicate operatives," upon which I was asked what bug, and
So it was you.
I said, well, the shotgun bug that's been there since years back. What shotgun bug was the question? And I was like, before I responded, I was like, wait, hold up a minute now. We've been using syndicate operatives for years now, and it's like they don't know about the bug. I mean, so I thought it was trolling. So I explained. Upon which the answer was, I'm gonna talk to the devs. And then 3.16 came and syndicate operatives was fixed. So, I mean, I'm not sure if it's the fact that they don't always know about the bugs, but I mean, this is something that has been out there for years and been like a prominent meta build based off a bug, and is like they didn't think about fixing it till somebody mentioned it straight to them. I mean, I don't know. That just feels so weird to me. Crappy pitchfork. Oh man. No, like I felt so bad for saying it because to me, to my understanding, was that they were fully aware of it. How could they not be aware of something like that? That was like it was even a meta build for 2 leagues in a row, for example.
Yeah.
So how could they not know? That's the weird part. Oh man. But yeah.
There's
So
just too many. There's too many interactions, too many skills, too many passes, too many. I mean, it's not only that there's 1,000 passive on the tree and 400 fucking skill gems or whatever. Uh, it's also the fact that you can interact with those in so many different ways. Look at, for example, timeless jewels, right? Timeless jewels have seeds which will, twist and turn what these passives even do. There's just so many interactions. I think. Um, Again, it's impossible to test everything. Now, Absolution needing a 400% damage buff and still being awful, probably a bit of an overlook, a bit of an oversight, right? Lack of testing. But to some extent, I mean, there's just so much. There's just so much to test, right? I mean, understandably, I wouldn't like to be on the other side and being the one who's testing it because you only have so much time and you only have so much testers and there's a lot of things to test and it's not just builds and interactions, it's also the league itself needs to be needs to be set. I mean, this league scourge is a really interesting one, being
Mhm.
able to shape from your map to a different world where you have to basically clear your map again. Uh, all the way down to the details. Like when you swap, everything around you gets stunned. That's crazy, right? Imagine if that wasn't there. People would just switch, instant die. So like all these little details that they had to go through. And then it's not just people will say, "Oh yeah, league mechanics sucks," right? Like I've done 300 quivers, and I haven't gotten anything good. I've done 300 bows, I haven't gotten it, whatever, right? Yeah, sure, but I mean, if you look at the technical standpoint, they still had to add like how much? I think it's like something like 300 plus scourge modifiers, uh, or something. It's a lot. It's a lot of things that all need to work. So I do think that overall they do a pretty good job
Mm.
of adding and removing and also testing. But there's bound to be some errors. But I guess that's kind of where the community aspect comes in, right? When you find something that's broken, you report it, and then hopefully they fix it in a timely manner. Now it's unfortunate that you killed syndicate operatives, though.
Yeah. Okay. I'll probably never hear the end of that. But it's like somebody mentioned in chat as well about that. Like, there's been Reddit threads, at least a couple of Reddit fucking posts every single league about them being bugged, and it's kind of weird to me that they didn't know it. Either way, something you're bringing up is rather interesting because I spoke to Chris Wilson about this. I think it was actually on stream during the interview where we talked about this with the communication error. It was when I was talking about absolution specifically. Like the damage buff made it able to get some ridiculous damage numbers on absolution in the current league, which is why it's being played with Dorian's prototype, for example. We can the DPS is miscalculated in POB, so we did the rough ballpark DPS that we could, and we ended up on like 2.6 billion shaper DPS in perfect year. It would be a glass cannon though. In my current build with 3 Sentinels out in the tanky version, I reached 360 million, but that's again once you have 3 Sentinels out, which takes a while. So it's like this, you can reach some absolutely disgusting numbers now. But there are other factors to take into consideration. But they would have been better off like making it a percent higher to summon it, and there's things they could have done that was better. But to get back on point, what Chris Wilson and what I was asking Chris Wilson was the communication from the testers to actually get things fixed right. And it seems from what Chris Wilson told us during the interview was that there was definitely a problem with the communication where it had been stated by testers that Absolution didn't do enough damage. Apparently, it had been stated several times, and despite that information, that didn't go through to getting fixed. So I'm not sure if that's because of the COVID situation and whatnot, but I think that, and I also think that the fix or their buff with 431% was also something they just threw in just to get something out of the way and then fine tune it later, which I'd rather prefer them to do, like overbuff shit and then fine tune it later is, in my opinion, a better solution to it. But right now, the amount of damage we can get out of Absolution is disgusting. Like a decently geared glass cannon Absolution 2 shots any bosses in the field. It's just absolutely crazy, like absolutely disgusting. Like it's like I mentioned earlier with the build I'm currently playing. It's like a 350 400x. I have a pretty juicy helmet. In that build, it's with 3 Sentinels out, 1 charge power, 1 frenzy charge, and the Rex Primal Matriarch Screech on a boss. That's 360 to 370 rough ballpark DPS. Take away 100 million out of that, which is not even close to how much they're doing, and you'll still be doing some insane damage if my calculations are wrong. I mean, I get 1 Sentinel out early on Cirrus, he's dead before he faces, and that's with 1 minion. You need about 100 million shaper DPS to face him before he teleports. So that's just ridiculous. But the problem with the build is that it's a 25% chance on hit to summon one. So I mean, you still need to cast 4 casts before you actually get that first minion out. But the DPS is ridiculous, right? But
That's
there are
interesting.
just still some other problems with the build in general, especially for clearing with only having 3 minions, right? But
Yeah, that sounds pain.
yeah. So there are definitely problems with it, but I don't know. Yeah, of course, the build is expensive and it's good because of that generally. But I mean, it's the damage is just absolutely way higher than it should be able to reach, even with that currency. I mean, it's just disgusting. But I think that that's generally just a problem with the communication between the testers and what's being actually adjusted based on what the communication has been from the testers. based on what Chris Wilson has told us in the interview. But I agree with you that they are generally doing a really, really good job. And there's a lot of things to be fixed. And I've always been, for the most part, a firm believer that GGG is doing a good job with what they do. And you can call me a GGG shill if you want to, like, but that's the way I feel about it. And I think we're both on that page, right? We think that they're doing a good job for the most part, even if there are problems. But with a game this big, nothing can be perfect for everyone, right? But I think they're doing the best they can from the situation they have, and we don't know how the spaghetti code looks like, or how their communication and work is going with people working from home with the COVID and lockdowns and everything's been going
Yeah.
on, and they still deliver a new league every third month, right? So I think it's pretty
Which
admirable in the end.
not many video game companies are doing, right?
Yeah,
And for free. Not to mention, it's not a DLC you don't have to pay for free, which I think is really good. But I mean, no, I'm very hypercritical of just about anything. So if it sucks, it sucks, and I'll say that it sucks. And if it's good, and I'll say that it's good. And you can't pay me to say otherwise, right? It's just how it is. Like, it's 3.16 was fucking hot garbage. I said that, and I made a video explaining all the problems with it. And what do you know? This league, if you look at the video, if you look at the document, about 80% of what was on there got fixed. So I'm not going to complain just for the sake of complaining. I'm not just gonna uh, going to talk shit for the sake of talking shit. It's just not what I do. Now, in recent leagues, there's been a lot of problems, so it might have seemed that way. But in the end, if it's good, it's good. And I'm not gonna find. There's a lot of people who try to find like the needle in the haystack, the one thing that's just problematic, and then they just kind of hone down on that one thing, and then they'll just be, oh yeah, game sucks. There's this problem. It's like, yeah, okay, but like look at everything else. Look at the bigger picture. So no, I do think that they're doing a really good job. And I mean, again, not perfect, but it's good enough to where I want to play the game, and that's really all I need. As long as I'm having fun, I mean, what else can you ask for, really?
yeah. But it's like I've told you before as well. You might as well say it on stream as well. That's why I really like the way you approach things as well. Like if you see something that this is a problem, you're not afraid to say that this is a problem, guys. Listen up,
Yeah.
that's a problem. But this is good. But this is a problem, and that's a problem, and this is a problem. But this is good. And there was an overwhelmingly big page filled with these things are bad in
Yeah, there's a
315.
lot of bad.
Yeah. And then 3.16 came and I'll be like, you know what? This list is kind of small. And now there's a lot of good things. Let's look at this now because, we can
Yep.
accept the bad things if the good things outweigh it. But 3.15 was the opposite. It was a lot of bad things that outweigh the
A
good
lot of
things.
bad. A lot of bad. I mean, I still do think that. I mean, look at just the flash changes, right? The flash changes were absolutely awful. Man, it made the game just pain. And then what they do, they kind of not necessarily reverted, but to some extent they fixed it. I don't have any issues with my flash. I still don't like the changes to movement abilities, but I can see why they did it. Movement abilities are like the number one thing that allow you to just basically uh do content that you should be able to do. Things like feared can easily be done if you're able to flame dash out of every single attack that comes towards you, right? Especially on a build that can off screen or whatever, like seismic trap. So I still I see why they did some of those changes, but in general, I think that they learned a lot with 3.15. I mean, obviously they said it right, losing 30% of their income probably was a bit of a wake up call. And Now, one thing that we haven't really talked about that I wanted to ask you about is the new uniques. How do you feel about Mage Blood and, well, Stasis, whatever? No one cares. But yeah,
Hardcore
Mage
does.
Blood, Hardcore does.
With stasis,
They have
yeah.
those.
You get
Do,
freaking immortal with it.
yeah, but like, has there a single person in Hardcore done a Uber five way?
Not that I know of, but I've been told that it's been used. I'm assuming that it's been done,
Really?
which
Oh
is
wow.
impressive in itself, to be
Yeah,
fair.
that's impressive. Yeah, that
Um,
is
I think that
very
Mage Blood
impressive.
is extremely overpriced.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I
Have you played
mean,
with it?
sorry.
Have you played with it? Like, do you have one?
Um, no, I will actually because a guy called Satham in my community, he did like normally when I make some of the builds that I care about the most, I make a low budget and a high budget, but I also add a mirror tier version of the build. And I originally planned to play that with the Mage Galley, but I ended up playing with the Dark Pact instead. But this guy, the Satham guy in the community, he did the mirror tier version of the Skelly Mage build almost to a T of how my POV was, like jewels and everything, and it's just so beautiful. I haven't seen if someone else do something like that with the gearing so on the point to how I would personally have done it. And he actually borrowed me the gear. I have it in my stash right now, so I'm gonna play it during this week. I'll actually respec my character just to play it, to record a video on it, and then give him back the gear, of course. It's just beautiful. And there's a mage blood in there, so I'm gonna be using it for that build just to test it out. But from what I've seen and theoretically about the belt, to me, when I looked at it, was like, yo, this is a cool 75, 125x belt. That's what it looked like to me. You know, it helps out with gearing, gives you the quality of life. A lot of people will pay for the quality of life. You know, that's what we get to see. Maybe it'll peak 150, 200 just for the quality of life. And now it's like 370, 400.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck is happening? But
yeah, I bought mine for a mirror somewhere a league or a week or so into the league, maybe a week and a half. Some guy gambled a bunch of them through Gwenin in my community, and I had a mirror in my stash. I was like, I'm willing to buy one for a mirror, but I'm gonna wait because they were kind of stable around mirror price, maybe plus 20x. And I was like, I think they're gonna go down. I don't know. I'll just wait. Mirrors are gonna go up no matter what. I should be fine. And then he was like, "Yeah, I mean, I just gambled like 2 of them with a headhunter on top. I'll trade you one for a mirror." I was like, sure, whatever. I mean, feels a bit weird to trade a mirror for just a unique belt, but I'll
yeah,
take it. But yeah, I couldn't have seen it at 400x. That's crazy. I mean, it's a great item. Don't get me wrong. I mean, just if you go like Ruby, Sapphire, Topaz, it's ridiculous how tanky you become to elemental damage. So if you're able to take a bunch of physical as elemental, you can kind of become immortal to some extent. Like only massive hits will kill you. Uh, I mean, there's for any spellcaster build, it's basically permanent righteous fire for free, which is 40% more damage because you get a ruby with the regen suffix. Pretty much any build can use righteous fire. There's a lot of things that you can do with it, but damn, 400x. A headhunter does a lot more work for you in juice maps. I will say that. I would never use a mage blood over a headhunter in like a beyond map or a double beyond map or a triple beyond map. No way. But I will say, I don't know. It's a cool item, and for the game has been missing these cool items. And it's not just that. Squire is also a really cool item, right? It's also more expensive than Headhunter. Also one of the newer uniques. Also more expensive than HH.
yeah,
I like this. I really hope that in 3.17 and going forward, we have these sort of items every single league. Now, maybe not necessarily as strong as Mage Blood, or maybe stronger, actually. I don't know. But I really hope that we have some chase unique, some things that we can go and be like, all right, I played this game a lot and I want this, and I'm going to have to work my ass off for it. Now, it does suck for the people who don't play the game a lot, but as I was saying yesterday on my stream, I feel like the people who are complaining about the price of those things, like Mage Blood, are probably also the people who are complaining the price of Headhunter, probably the people who are complaining the price of Inspired Learnings, right? So it's like, to some extent, if you're never going to be able to afford it, it doesn't really matter too much, because I mean, realistically, you're never going to be able to afford it, right? It was
yeah,
going to be an expensive item from the get go. We all knew that it would be at the very least around the price of a headhunter. So if you can't afford headhunter, you know, and if you can't afford a headhunter, just do whatever you did to afford a headhunter. Do it 4 times, and all of a sudden you have a mage blood. And headhunter is going to speed you up in your farming towards mage blood, right? So let's say you want to farm a mage blood and you're doing a surge strategy right now. You have 100x in your stash. Get yourself a headhunter, man. It's going to speed up your farming so much. And when you have the 300x, just sell off the headhunter and you'll have your mage blood.
yeah.
Obviously, this is just like theory for the people who really want one. But I will say that headhunter will speed you up a lot more than a mage blood will in farming for the vast majority of content in the game outside of bossing. Even if you don't have Beyond on your map, headhunter is better than mage blood, pretty much, for mapping. So, but it's a cool item, and I really hope that we get more cool items. I mean, I think Squire is such a cool, unique man. The builds that people are coming up with, like, you saw probably the 12 link sword, right?
Yeah.
Bible of a sword. Man, it's like nobody would have ever crafted this before. It's really just because Squire came out that people, now
Yeah.
have the I mean, the reason to even craft those sort of items. So it's really cool. Those sort of items, I think, open up the game a lot, and they open up some possibilities that just weren't there before. I will say this though. I want to ask you this: divination card. What do you think? Yes or no? Divination card for Squire for Mage
Oh
Blood.
yeah, I was
Yes or no?
going to say that. Like, I think that the fact that they have like these items are there, and I honestly, I hope that they make Mage Blood, Squire, all of these things, stasis. I hope they just keep them in the game permanently. We needed chase items, but most
Yes.
importantly, we needed more chase items that is not devalued by div cards. That's what I want. I don't want
So you're
any of the div
saying no
cards for
div
them.
cards?
No div
Dude,
cards for
same.
them.
Same. I've been saying that. People have been really mad at me for saying that. But I actually think now this is unfair, right? Because we're content creators. We get to play the game 20 hours, 10 hours a day. We don't have to worry about buying pieces of items, right? We can just make the currency and buy the automite rate,
Yeah.
which I think is unfair to everybody who doesn't have that possibility. But I will say very selfishly, I really hope that they don't make any div cards for those items because it gives you a reason to play, right? It gives you a reason to actually farm up that amount of currency, which is a lot. Now, to be fair, 400x, that's pretty bullshit. That's a lot. Like 200, sure, 150, okay. Same price of a headhunter, 100x, cool. 400 is nuts, but I mean, it is the new shiny toy, right?
Mm.
And there has been some speculation. I'm sure you've heard of the video from Grimro
Yeah,
in
yeah.
regards to price fixing and market manipulation. That all plays a role. But yeah, I hope that in the end they don't make div cards for those items, Squire and whatnot. And I hope that they keep adding items like that, which some people would say break the game, but there's nothing wrong with breaking the game if it comes with a big price tag. The problem, in my opinion, is when you can break the game with no gear, with zero items, kind of like Seismic Trap right now.
Yeah.
You could literally do the feared hardest encounter in the game with a couple Exalt invested. That's just how stupid the build is.
Yeah.
Now, those sort of things I think are a little bit unhealthy, or quite a bit unhealthy. But an item that is a chase item that allows you to break the game and feel like a god when it's an ARPG, which is basically the whole point, I think is only fair.
Yeah. Now, I think that the my biggest problem with div cards is the devaluing of the high
Yeah,
ticket items, right? There's that, and the
absolutely.
fact that there's no theme around the items. Like, say for Chevron's wrappings, for example, yeah, you can farm the Chevron's card from Chevron, right? That's a really
Yeah.
cool way to do it. That's a great deterministic way of farming a somewhat chase item, which is not that much of a chase item anymore, but you can deterministic farming. You can choose to run that map to drop those cards and have a chance of getting that specific item, right? Same thing with the idea of farming a Star Forge was really cool. You did Shaper, but the problem is the div card for Star Forge doesn't even drop from Shaper. That comes from a backsoth. So like that's so weird to me that they just do this. And the problem with all of those is a stack dex just solves that entire problem.
Yep. Yeah, that was a big issue that I had in one of my biggest concerns in my video last league with all the problems with PoE was stacked decks. But I feel like this league they did a good job. I mean, yeah, use scourge maps, which you stack deck as a reward, but it doesn't feel like the league mechanic is just showering you in stack decks because there's nothing else to offer. The
No.
same as we've had in many leagues previously. It's like whenever GGG has a problem with the league or something that they feel is not necessarily rewarding enough, they just throw stack decks at you. It's like, yeah, just have fun, just gamble,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's just a really lame way to fix unrewarding leagues. Um, so I'm actually really happy with how they did with Scourge. I think it's a really good. Actually, personally, I think it's a really good league in league mechanic. Not just because of the league and the state of the game, but like the actual mechanic itself. Now, the scourging of items does kind of suck, but the scourging of maps is really cool. And yes, stack decks is one of those possible rewards, but that's not even one of the better ones. Scarabs is really good, simulacrum splinters, maps, etc. There's some really cool stuff that they did there. So I do think that they should keep going that way and try to basically minimize just showering players in stack decks because, as you said, it makes it so all these really big ticket items, the more stack decks there are, the easier they are to get. As long as there's a div card for them. So no div card means that you can't cheat your way through it, um, and therefore it keeps its value. Now again, I'll repeat that 400x for a mage blood is too much. It's
Yeah.
too much. But
But
if it
like,
was 150, 200, I could see that.
I don't think that, like, I think that I would be okay with div cards in general for these big items if they were only achievable from certain extremely hard encounters. Say Mage Blood, yeah, man,
True.
gate it behind one of the Uber encounters
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just
I
make
mean,
it
that'd be
not
cool.
possible to get from stack decks, or just remove stack decks entirely from the game. I mean, that would literally be the best way to do it, in my opinion, but I know some people would be
Yep.
upset with that. But if
They
you
paid.
make so that like these big div cards are only achievable from very specific content, such as their Chevron for Chevron's wrappings, for example, you have to kill that boss to get a chance to drop in the div cards, which gives you a chance of getting, the RNG upon RNG. But you can farm it, and you'll eventually get the Chevron's wrappings, right? You can do that if your character is able to do very hard content, like one of the Uber content. Then getting the mage blood is not going to enable your build to do that content. It's just another way of playing the game, and it's just a cool thing, that one of those big dick things that just breaks the entire game kind of approach with how you can run with mage blood from different aspects of defensive to offensive, just quality of life to speed to right, just fire enabling approaches with it. But just simply farming it on the hardest encounters in the game, like you maybe give it a really low drop rate from doing the feared, or even harder, like go for wave 30 simulacrums, gives you a chance on the last wave to drop one. Something like any of those uber content. Then I would be fine with there being a div card if that's the only way to get the fragment of the item. That's the only way I'd accept it. Other than that, I don't want it. I don't want div cards for it. It's breaking the game. It's too many. If I want to farm an end
Yeah,
game boss for an item, then
I
I'm
agree.
gonna have to farm that boss for the item. I don't want the div card for
That
it.
that actually be really cool, to be honest. If they like, how it is currently like that, right? Like if you do a map with Shavron as the boss, there's a chance that you drop, the what's the name of the card again? The offering,
Yeah.
right? There's a chance. Or if you do a map with the Alira as the boss, there's a chance you get a doctor. Um, that's really cool. I like these themes where you have a specific map boss allowing you to get a specific div card. And I do think that gating, if they're going to be making a Mage Blood card or something, they should gate it behind a really, really hard content. And I do think that they should take the really, really rare jackpot div card possibilities out of the stack decks. Just have stack decks as a fun little thing that you can do, but that you can't get some crazy rewarding, some crazy card for a crazy item, because they are super easy to farm. Like you can literally farm hundreds and hundreds of stack decks in heists of like before maps, right? Before you even hit maps, you can be farming stack decks. So it is cool, and I'm sure a lot of people would get mad at what I said because maybe their league start they opened up a doctor and it paid for their entire build, and they're like, well, if I didn't get that stack deck, didn't get that div card or that doctor, my build would have been or my league would have been a different story.
Mhm.
And I agree with that, but at the same time, I think looking at the bigger picture and the health of the game is probably better. And having people walking around with headhunters on day two because these stack decks exist, in my opinion, definitely makes progressing the game too fast, right? Especially in group scenarios or in scenarios like people like me who will just do bossing and to just abuse like the ridiculous profitability of bossing. And all of a sudden it's day three. There's still 87 days of the league, and we have our headhunters, right? Like group plays or solo players abusing currency strategies and all that. And then after that, it's like, well, what's next, right? Like, yeah, we get to play with our headhunters, but at that point, it's like any farming strategy is basically completely obsolete unless it requires the headhunter because we have it, right? So it kind of speeds up the progress. I think that's my main problem with stack decks is that it speeds up how fast people get to certain content the same way Orbots did, and then they kind of nerfed Orbots, and I think that was a really good change. They could even nerf him further. There's definitely still very very powerful uh, tools in group play, but I do think that that's my main issue. It's the fact that people kind of treat it POE as a race instead of as a marathon, and stack decks are one of the main reasons for that because you can buy pieces of the items, right? Instead of having to buy the big ticket item. And because you can buy the item in pieces, you're going to get it for a hell of a lot cheaper then it would be worth. Like Headhunter without any of the div cards for it would be what, 200x probably,
Probably.
250, something like that. Uh, Imagine if it was 200 or 250. Groups would take a lot longer to get it, and then solo players would take a lot longer to get it as well. Which means that the early game farming strategies would stay a lot better for a lot longer because they wouldn't be completely abused and what's the word, devalued by the people who get their headhunters super early that can go farm end game stuff. Biggest example of that is the Nemesis 3 Sextant. You know, obviously you know about Nemesis 3 farming. It devalues bubblegum currency so much. If you look at the price of any bubblegum currency, the moment it becomes mainstream to farm Nemesis 3, any bubblegum currencies is now worthless. So as a regular player who's just farming their regular maps, the currencies that you're picking up are devalued by multiple times. Like it's ridiculous how devalued they become because somebody or a group of people or a lot of people, anyways, are farming Nemesis 3, which is enabled by the Headhunter uh, early. Which I don't know. In my opinion, that's kind of a little bit unhealthy for the economy of the game and the longevity of the game as well.
I think that another great example of how early access to Headhunter specifically breaks the game for the people that don't make the currency to buy the Headhunters was Legion League. There was like a huge problem where the only way you could break even on running a 5-way early in the league required you to have a really decked out character, and it took like 3 days from where that breaking point required you to have a headhunter. During that time span, most of the players that never can afford that, they were still in fucking acts. Like they were in white maps when this transition happened. And then when that stage was done, you reached a point where headhunters themselves, despite the cards, were super expensive because it was literally the key that you needed as a player to allow you to run 5-ways, which meant that the casual players or the people that weren't making a ton of currency, they had to run tier 2 glacier farming for ages to afford the headhunter to allow them to run a 5-way without losing currency doing it. It was at the point where if you were a player that didn't invest enough time to be able to make that currency, you couldn't do a 5-way run without that being a huge investment for you to experience the league mechanic, which I think was terrible. And it was just absolutely disgusting. And the ones who did it early, they were making thousands of exalteds because they were doing this early enough where the prices were lower. And it was just absolutely disgusting. And a lot of people quit the league because of this extreme gatekeeping that was going on because of this. And that is just another example of how easy it is to access these things and how that hurts the casual and newer players. It has nothing to do with the 1%ers, getting easier access to more currency and how we're preaching and promoting changes to the game that is going to be better for the 1% players. What both me and Matt are talking about is things that we believe is better for the general population of the game. We're talking about the longevity of the game, and the only way we can have 1% players is if we have a vast majority of non-1% players playing the game. We don't exist if the others don't exist. Like it has to be a healthy ecosystem. And as soon as the game goes into a direction that it only caters to one type of those type of players, the remaining portion of the player base will just will have less fun with it and therefore get hurt by it. So the thing is, when it comes to, we're talking about headhunter cards, and the thing is that doesn't really tackle like the largest portion of the community, because the largest portion of the community are not the people farming for headhunter cards either, to be fair. So we're talking about a large portion, but not the largest portion. I think that needs to be clear as well as we're talking about these things. But that's just some of the examples. But when we say that we don't want divination cards for big ticket items that comes from stacked decks, that is a huge problem with a lot of things. So we're not talking about stacked decks being for the big ticket items. We're talking about the fact that you can kill end game bosses before you even started. You don't even have to start your Atlas before you can gain access to killing Uber Elder, for example. You can kill Shaper and all of these end game bosses. You can do all of that through divination cards thanks to stacked decks. You can have a full Uber Elder set ready before you're done with maps because of stack decks, and that is
Yep.
ridiculous.
Yeah, last league, my duo and I, he was trading and flipping from day one, and I was killing bosses, and I entered Uber Elder around 12 hours into the league, or something. It was the first to. Nobody had even killed Shaper yet, and I was at Uber Elder because stag decks give you Elder's Decay, and it's only a 4 set card, so you just got to
Yeah.
get a little lucky, and you get a full set. And yeah, Uber Elder before people even got into Shaper. It's pretty ridiculous. When people, I saw someone in chat say you're out of touch. Respectfully, most average players don't even see a headhunter card. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the average player, most people farm headhunters. That's not what I'm saying. The vast majority of people are never even going to think about having a headhunter. I'm saying the vast majority of people who enter a map and kill monsters and pick up things on the ground, those things on the ground are greatly devalued by the people who get headhunters really, really early, and they can go farm content that is super, super, super juiced up, like Nemesis 3 with Triple Beyond and Legions and Breaches and all that. They are dropping more alterations and chaos and regrets and scouring orbs and all that, more bubblegum currency in a single map than you are probably dropping in your entire day of playing the game. That's how ridiculous it is. And when I say entire day, it could mean in one map they will drop more than you drop in 8 hours. That's ridiculous. And that is enabled by having the headhunter. And the problem is, initially, that won't have too much of an effect if it's only a few people. But put in more and more and more people who start doing that, all of a sudden, those bubblegum currencies are just going to keep going down and being devalued and devalued and devalued. So, as a regular player who doesn't have the headhunter, who doesn't even think about that, the majority of things that you're picking up in your maps are all of a sudden greatly devalued. So that's what I'm saying that.
Yeah. So it's basically what I was referring to as well. So what Matt is saying is basically that a player who doesn't pick up loot, sorry, that doesn't get the headhunter or even think about farming the cards for it, everything they get is just worth less because of the impact that stack decks have an easier access to headhunters and all of those things because it devalues the loot that they're picking up. And it seems like the chat wasn't entirely catching on to that. I hope that clarifies everything from what his
Yeah,
point of view, because I completely agree with him on it, and I think he's
I mean,
absolutely correct.
it's basically like back when fractured maps were a thing, right? Back when
Sure.
100% Delirious fractured maps were a thing, the people who were farming it were greatly devaluing things like breach stones and scarabs and all that because we were dropping hundreds upon hundreds on every single map. We had to use all 6 portals just to pick up loot,
Oh yeah.
right? It was the same thing. Um, you know, Now if you want to do if you want to do 100% delirious scarab map, you're going to need 5 skittering orbs, which are priced accordingly. So and all of a sudden, what do you know, scarabs are way expensive ever since they removed that in breach stones, right? It used to be a chaos in bulk for things like Zov breach stones and F and or Esh and all that. Now it's like at least 10C for any of the breach stones, no matter how bad. So yeah, it's the same thing now with like bubblegum currencies and M3. And personally, I wouldn't be mad if they got rid of that sextant. I think it's slightly game breaking. I really dislike having it in the game. It's just something that people can abuse way too much. It's probably the number one source of exalts dropping in the entire game as well. I do think that it could definitely go.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that a lot most people that don't farm that don't go for the big ticket items have the interest, knowledge, or time or the will to do so. I think that a lot of these people have a very distinct perspective on the game that they firmly believe in, and until they get the information and knowledge, they are incapable of understanding the impact that these things have in the game, such as the stack decks. The impact of what stack decks is doing in the game is massive, and it's not just having access to an Uber fight before you even start mapping. That's just hilarious. That's supposed to be an in-game aspirational encounter that you're supposed to utilize for the feared encounter, which is ultimately, prior to 3.16, the hardest fight in the game. And with 3.16, we
Yep.
have some Uber content. The fact that you have access to that before you even start mapping should never be a thing. You can have a full Uber series set, you can have a Cortex you can you can have everything you need to do all the fights, to get access all the fights that you need for Fear before you even start mapping because of stacked decks. It's insane.
I think Cortex is the only one that there's no source of yet
Is there
for.
for the
There's no
unique
div
card?
card for Cortex. Is there? Oh, I guess
I
there's
have
a
to double
card for
check.
unique map,
Yeah,
but
that's what I
I'm
was
not sure if
thinking.
you can even get Cortex for it.
I have to double check.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm
No, no,
not
you
100%
can,
sure.
you
I feel
can.
like I've never. Yeah,
Encroaching
for the unique div
Darkness,
card.
Jackie
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Vox, and the Voice. There's three different cards for it.
Yeah, that would be pretty lucky to get that. It's not
Yeah,
like deterministic, but yeah, to some extent you could. However, the set for Uber's area, yeah, that one
that's
there's literally
easy.
a mortal. Yeah, that one's super easy. And then yeah, the Uber Elder is really easy. They even added one this league for Shaper Guardians. Um, Now I think the Shaper Guardian card drops in Shaper Guardian maps though. I don't know where else it drops. But there was a dude with like the 300 of them, so I guess he figured out where to farm them. I don't know. But yeah, they're constantly like stack decks are basically just making the game progress a little bit too quick. I think that's kind of the TLDR is stack decks allow progression way faster than natural progression goes. And I think the biggest example of that is BPL. There are no stack decks in BPL, or at least not huge amounts of stack decks in BPL, and progress is a lot slower, right? A lot slower. Now it's still fast because you have 600 people in a team that are all working for one person, right? But unaffected by stack decks in the economy and not being basically rushed through the game via stack decks, it's still way slower. People were doing Cyrus really quickly, but that's because you can easily get to Cyrus through just knowing your way around the Alice. But nobody had killed Shaper something like 18 hours into the league, I think we were, and nobody had killed Shaper yet, or something like that. In
Mm.
a regular trade league, Uber Elder's been dead for 6 hours. Uber Elder's around 12 hours into the league that people start farming him because of the cards, right? Shaper wasn't even done at that point. So, and that's with 600 people on per team, right? 600 people working towards one goal. So obviously, not everyone. Some people are going to be heisting. Some people are going to be delving. Not everyone is just mapping and getting to T14 plus maps and all that to drop the Guardian cards and whatnot. But or sorry, the Guardian maps. But that's still a lot of people working towards one specific goal for one specific boss killer, and it takes a lot longer. So yeah, there's definitely the aspect, and that's the one that I like the least about stack decks is the fact that you can just skip progression
Yeah.
entirely.
No, that's definitely a big impact of it. But yeah, comparing it to BPL, I mean, you have 600 per team because you're not supposed to trade with the others, and you wouldn't trade those things
Yeah,
with the other team anyways, especially for the point related stuff with BPL. You compare 600 people with, I'd say we are quite regularly above 100,000 players, active peak players on league launches. Like 100,000 people versus the 600 you have, like it's a massive difference where StackDex really ramps up, right? And then
yeah, especially
obviously
when
like
everyone's
we
heisting.
yeah, and then we have the other aspect of it that we already kind of beaten to death already, but I will repeat it one last time, I guess, with how these things being accessible is hurting the casual players in the end. And I think a lot of people need to understand what impact the 1% players have on the casual player base as well. Just as much as the casual player base have a huge impact on the 1% player base as well. But then I also agree with the perspective that stacked decks, if you talk about that specifically, that obviously the keeping them in a game can in some degree be good for the casuals players as well. Like you mentioned as well. Hey, I had a league start. I dropped a stack deck that gave me a doctor card. My league start was amazing now. And then you have, the aspect for the people that didn't get that and they didn't have any specific benefits for it, and they only reap the cons from their bubblegum currency being worth less. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
it's
bubblegum currency is one thing, but there's hundreds of different divination cards at this point, and pretty much every single divination card, if they are allowing you to get a piece of something, is highly devaluing that piece of gear. I mean, just look at Shabs, for example. It's probably the best example you have. Shabs used to be extremely expensive item. Now, maybe it's a good thing because it enables like low life gameplay or game style, but still, it's like before div cards for Shabs. I mean, obviously we're going back years and years, so it's not exactly a fair comparison. But If I had to guess, if Shav's div card did not exist, Shavs would be a hell of a lot more expensive than it is in a league start scenario. So if you are that regular player just going through maps and you drop a Shaz, now you're not getting a whole lot for it. Meanwhile, you would probably get a hell of a lot more for it if there is no div card for it. But I guess you do have to look at the other side of the medal. What if you want a Shavs? All right. If you want a Shavs, if you need a Shavs for your build, div cards allow you to get it for way cheaper than if they didn't exist. So I guess there's just two sides of the medal. And if you want something, they're good, but it devalues things. So for the people finding the things, they're bad. So I guess it comes down to who's more important, the people who want the things or the people who find the things.
Yeah. No, I think like the topic is very hard. Like one thing's for certain, they should never remove div cards at least because they've been paid for. It's supporter
Yeah, they've
packs.
been paid for.
Yeah, so and I think div cards are really cool in the game. I really do. I just
Oh
think
yeah.
that they should be. What a lot of people have been complaining about is deterministic farming. No one goes into a map saying, "Hey, I'm gonna hope I drop an exalted in this map." We do with M3, sure, but no one goes into the
Yeah.
map saying, "Hey, I'm gonna drop a mirror or I'm gonna drop an exalted this map." No one has that in mind. It happens, great, but nobody
Yeah.
goes in these days and be like, "I'm gonna farm this boss and I'm gonna drop I'm gonna drop a card for Mage Blood," right? Because it doesn't exist, right?
Yep.
But people go in and they be like, "I'm gonna farm nurses or I'm gonna farm doctors," and that devalues the headhunter. And I think that's really cool, kind of iconic at this point. But we wanted to see more chase items that don't have the div cards locked behind them. People say, "Hey, I want to farm a Star Forge. What's the best way to get a Star Forge?" Well, you farm Shaper, but not these days because the div cards and the access to it. It's better for you to farm currency and buy the div cards and get the Shaper, the
Yeah.
Star Forge. That's just cheaper, and it's just better for you to do than to actually do the content that's gated behind it. But that's also bringing me to another topic we can move into.
Sure.
It's boss uniques. They made some changes with the series disfavor by moving it to regular series. Uh, but the question I had in mind was, I have a problem personally with end game bosses that are ridiculously hard, right? Super hard. Maven, Uber Elder, and these things that are supposed to be hard at least. There's some builds that, trivializes them, which is always going to be the case. They can't remove that from being the thing. But
Yep.
the rewards are used by builds that are, they're supposed to be. Well, right now, the problem is that uniques dropping from these bosses are used by builds not able to kill the bosses. You need something better than what drops from the bosses to kill the bosses, basically, for the most part.
Yeah.
It feels like that's the case, right? And even in the situation with some builds, at least in the past, when it comes to the disfavor buff, sorry, not buff, the meta, where people use disfavor all the time, then people needed that to kill Uber at Siri. So they needed the item to be able to kill it for those builds specifically. So they had to wait for builds that were not using it to kill it, so they could buy it, so they could farm it and sell it to other people playing the same build to kill the Uber at Siri. It's
Nice.
just fucking
No, I do think
ridiculous.
that boss loot sucks.
Yeah.
Boss loot's just pretty bad. And that goes for just about every boss. I mean, sure, there's a few items here and there. If you look at Uber Elder, right? Mark of the Shaper, Mark of the Elder. To some extent, there's some pretty okay rings. I mean, you have the Quiver, right? Void Fletcher is pretty good. You've got a few items here or there, but I mean, yeah, the vast majority of the loot that are coming from the bosses are bad, and you end up farming the boss just for some sort of fragment or some sort of enabling you to farm something else, like the Feared, for example, with Uber Elder, or the Watcher's Eyes. But I do think that they could definitely. I mean, even just adding some sort of like we've been talking about those super endgame div cards, if they make them, or even taking some existing ones and adding them to some of the endgame content, maybe giving uh like in terms of the drop pool, adding some of these more expensive div cards could make it more something that people can look forward to, right? Because now it's like you make a bossing character early game because it's really, really profitable. But after that, you kind of just forget that bossing is a thing, period, because it's just awful. Um, yeah, it's just not very good. So maybe adding something in the drop table, such as div cards, that maybe have some sort of relevance to the boss that you're fighting, could be interesting. But it is true that it's just not very appealing to go fight these bosses outside of the very beginning of the league.
Yeah. No, I think that both Cirrus and Uber Elder are probably the two. Now outside Delve, because all is always going to be amazing.
Yeah, all is
Hardest
good.
boss in the game, probably one of the most amazing fights you can ever encounter. I think that's perfectly
Great
designed.
fight.
Yeah, and it gets ridiculously hard to the point where a 1000x build is going to have problems killing it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then some. So I think that's really cool. But Uberl and Seer is probably the two best balanced drops because some are kind of shit, but there's always that little chance of a woke orb. There's always that little
Yeah.
chance of the awakened gems. There's the Uberl with the Watcher's Eye. You know, gives you that little great thing. You get that one gives you a chance of getting that big ticket Watcher's Eye, right? I think those are pretty well balanced.
Yep.
Obviously, there's some shit loot from them as well, which is okay, right? And
It
you
has
look
to.
at yeah,
There has to be,
exactly.
yeah.
And then you have other bosses which is just completely destroyed in terms of values. Like what happened to Uber Theory? I remember the days when I did Uber Theory farming on my summoner back in Standard League, what 7 years ago, whatever it was. Dude, getting it serious acuity, that was 200x. Getting it as favor, that was I think it was 80 to 100x back then. It was insane, dude. Crazy.
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was a hard fight, but then we got the ascendancy trees and whatnot, and many years now. But it's like the fights were really hard, and now it's like a walk in the park. And I understand that we're getting stronger with as the years go by, but the fight themselves doesn't feel as interesting to do, and the rewards are kind of meh. We're only doing it to access the invitations for the points, and then you never want to do them again because it's just not worth doing. The only reason anyone would run Uber series is to do the fear because we have Cortex there for the
Yep.
Flask and Uber here for the
That's
V.
it.
That's it, right? I don't
And
know.
I mean, even one of the late the super newer bosses is like one of the worst in the game. Maven? What does Maven drop?
Well, the Maven Orb.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. It's like there's not a single item for Maven that is any good. It's like you get the orb or you don't. That's so boring. I don't know. Like yeah, you can do the math on it and figure out if it's profitable or not, but it's just kind of a boring fight. It doesn't help that it did hundreds of them as carries this league, but it's just kind of a boring fight. I mean, I think that just adding like the potential to drop an elevated item in the pool, like any item, any elevated mod would have just added so much like flavor to it,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Say you kill Maven and all of a sudden you drop a pair of boots with elevated tailwind. Damn, dude. Like you've got a pair of boots which now you can go ahead and Awakener's Orb and do some crafting with it. And it's actually really exciting. Now it's just like, oh, I got the orb. Oh, I didn't. I didn't. I didn't. I
Yeah, I
didn't.
mean,
Oh,
last
I
league,
got the
Aurelius
orb,
Veil was
you
worth a
know?
lot, but that's it, right? This
I
league,
mean, even then, it was only worth a lot for a about a week, not even a week. And
yeah.
after that, it just started plummeting.
But on the other hand, the helmet's good. I'd say the helmet's actually good, even if the price is down.
Yeah,
Similar to how the
it's a pretty
Cirrus
okay helmet.
helmet's really good as well. Like it's such a common thing, but it's like the chat is saying as well. It's just oversupplied. Like that's the
Yeah,
problem behind it. Cirrus, everyone will fight Cirrus. Like even casual players will fight Cirrus. I don't know how many will actually kill it, but most people will fight Cirrus, right? And that's going to present a situation where they're going to get some helmets, right? Just going to get oversupplied. People will do Maven, either get serviced or they will kill it. Simply because it's gated behind getting your points in the middle of the tree. People that play the game a lot will make sure they get their points, maybe through servicing the kill or killing it themselves. Doesn't matter. They'll make sure they do that. And then you have the people farming Maven because if the prices of the Maven's Writs is, I think it's if it's cheaper to buy for Maven's Writs than
yep,
it is to
4,
buy
yep,
Maven Orb, you'll rather farm it yourself because the drop rate is 25%, right?
yep. And then you have elevated sections and other things that are going to come add up to your profit
Yeah.
over time as well. But yeah, no, I just thought that there's just flavor that can be added, and especially because there's so many items in the game, it wouldn't be so hard, I think, to just add uh some drops that are actually interesting to just about all the bosses. Uber Zeri as well. Just add something to do with something that's new, something that's fun, elevated items, fractured items. I don't care. You kill a Zeri, she gives you like a fractured item. It could be good, it could be bad. Most of the time we know it's gonna suck. But this one time you get an 86 thicket bow with +2 arrows. Yeah, you just made bank, right? Like it's just It's not necessarily getting it, it's knowing that you can.
Yeah,
Knowing
but
that
they
there's
did
a
add a few, right?
chance.
Like the yeah, the chat's actually bringing it up now that they added like the vault skill ring for Siri, and we already have it for
Yeah,
Cortex thanks to the middle tree points, right? So we have access to that. But
yeah.
it's the remaining fights that don't have any interesting flavor to it. But also to mention, which we should underline for the ones watching and the ones watching this on YouTube later, and like these are obviously for things for the people that are killing them, which is obviously not that many percent of the player base that are actually killing or even less farming these end game bosses. But it's still a problem for that kind of approach. On the other hand, the players that are doing these things, we have just been provided with some like absolutely amazing content. We've been provided with aspirational content that a lot of us people have been wanting for a long time, and that is in the form of the Uber content. 30 wave simulacrums, flawless. Have you done a flawless breachstone, by the way?
Yeah,
How did you
yeah.
feel about it?
They're hard. they're they're really hard.
So
I
fast.
did a flawless what's it called? Tull.
Yeah.
And I told the guy who wanted me to do it to just come in the map. I was on my general cry build. I was like, yeah, there's no way this is gonna be hard. I'll do so much damage. Yeah, no, 2-man HP flawless breach shown is it's hard. These guys are nothing to mess around with, and the breach shown goes quick.
Yep.
That's the other thing is you have to kill those monsters really fast because otherwise you're just gonna fail it. No, I mean aspirational content we wanted and aspirational content we got. I mean I haven't done any Uber five ways yet. I don't know if you've tried those at all. But
Not yet.
I mean, five ways are already difficult once you get to the later portion of it. So I can only imagine how hard Uber five ways would be. Wave 30 simulacrums is insanely difficult for a vast majority of the builds. I mean, even my general cry guy, it was a beast of a build. And wave 30 sometimes, depending on the mods, right? When you get unlucky, you get double tank with some crazy damage mods. You can definitely go face in the dirt pretty damn quick. Uh, it's fun. It's good. I like it. I like content that's really hard and that makes me want to invest into my character. That gives me a reason to actually I put 100x into my character, but that's not enough. I've got to put another 100x and then another 100x. And then at this point, I can do the content, but then I want to do it faster. I want it more efficiently. I don't want to do it better. So I got to put more currency. And I think that's what the game is all about. You've got to have that content, which you want to invest for the same way that deep delving used to be, right? You
Mhm.
couldn't deep delve to 6K on some trash tier build. You're just going to hit a wall. So you've got to have the actual characters that even the fear to some extent is really easy, right? You take a seismic trap build or some other broken meta build and you can do that content like super easily. But it's really hard to bypass the new Uber content. You are going to need a seriously good build, and that's kind of what we've been needing. Content that requires us to have those good builds the same way that fractured maps required us to have good builds. Ever since 100% Delhi fractured maps have been gone, this has kind of been there's no need for these builds, but now there is, so it's cool.
Yeah. No, like I did the something I realized after reaching 24, 25 wave simulacrum was the added mods they did with penetration values and the physics extra as chaos. I was
Oh
like,
yeah, it's
fuck
chaos.
me. And then I did the flawless breach though. The first two I did, I was like, oh, this was hard. Like I had to focus. I had to like stop sitting on my foot because I was sitting on one of my foot when I'm gaming. Like I had to fucking sit and put the foot down on the ground, lean forward, and be like fully focused until the very end of the breach. Though, and I was like, "Whew, I made it. Now I can relax, right?" And then the third breach that I did, it was penetration of chaos and physics of chaos. I was like, "Shit, fuck this. I'm just gonna rework my." I think I spent like 750x on that build. I was like, "Fuck this. I'm getting rid of 35 million shaper DPS. I'm putting a shield on this guy, which I've never done before." Just to get better block and chaos rest. And now it's better, but it's still rip risky as fuck. And it is so fucking fast. It's crazy. And I love that because it's like, finally, I have something that challenges a build that shits on everything else. And I know that this is aspirational content for the kind of players that plays this a lot. But the fact that this type of content finally exists in the game does goes to show that GGG does give a fuck about us players as well. because it's something that I believe both of us, Beth, both of us, we're focusing a lot on making sure that the game is providing us, well as we provide as much knowledge as we can for the new and newer players so they can move up from being a casual player to being a casual player with more knowledge so they can move up in their skill level. And that's something that we focus a lot on. And that's what we do. But suddenly there's content for us to do that, as well as having things that are super challenging for us to do as well, which just enhances the enjoyment we get out of the game. And I think that's one of the big things with this league, for me at least. There's so much I can do that is focusing on the content I provide, but also for my personal enjoyment in the game. Like I've never had content that's been this hard for my builds to handle. And it's lovely to see how I have to go into a build that is decked out with mirror tier gear, and I have to change it to be tankier to handle the content. Like that's never happened before, and that's just lovely. I think they really did a good job with the aspirational content.
No, for sure. I mean, it was one of the other things I stated in my video last week with all the problems that I had with PoE was that Cast on Death Portal meta was just way too strong.
Oh
It
yeah.
was just way too strong, and this new content basically just said, yeah, Cast on Death Portal, keep dreaming, dude. Like you're gonna have to invest into defenses, and it's really good that they gave us ability to actually invest into some proper defenses. Um, I'm really, really happy actually with the state of defenses, the ability to invest into some maximum resistances when you're bottom right hand side of the tree, so that you can actually like be able to tank spells and stuff coming your way. That's always been a big problem. So getting to like 80 max res for very little investment now is super good. And then you could go way further. Purity of elements, immunity to elements, and res. Super, super good aura, especially for leveling. I think if you take any leveling build, you remove like your heralds and you throw in purity of elements, you're gonna have a much better time leveling. It's just yeah, they did a lot of good things with when it comes to defenses, and also they added content that requires us to have those new defenses and those improved defenses to even be able to do it. So
Mhm.
really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like you said about the flask as well. I wasn't too happy with the flask changes initially, and I think a lot of us felt that way. Bex reached out to most of us asking for feedback as well, and it was like it's just shit. I had nothing good to say about it. It's like this is terrible. Proactive, reactive. I mean, just look at the game, please. I mean, it's not that hard. Hello. And then 3.16 comes, and they're like, I think they hit the spot with it. I think flasks are in a better state than ever. We feel like I feel right now that suddenly flask becomes a items that I can upgrade in my character, getting those tier one rolls like the incision diamond flask of the surgeon or surgeon's flask of the incision,
Yep.
whatever. That shit's one exalted. I mean, and it was like fucking amazing. I was like, wow, tier one, and this is crazy good. It was awesome to feel that I'm progressing my character on the flask, because normally we reach level 70 or 80 or whatever flask you wanted to run with, and you were like, okay, I'm done with my flask. I don't have to touch them for the rest of the game. Now it's like I can actually upgrade them and go back to it. And it's beautiful to see with the way they sorted the flask in a very effective way. And then the defensive layers that they've added, it just feels really good. And I haven't really, like most of us softcore players, we haven't really cared about defenses that much, and with the content they introduced that somewhat requires it, forces us into it. But instead of forcing us into this black pit of no having no access to what we need to do it, we're forced into a corner on the tree or the corner of our character progression that actually has the tools readily available for us. And I think that's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, for sure. It's really, really good. I mean, like you said, for the flask, when I got my mage blood this league, my first mage blood, I had to get resistances or whatever. No, sorry, I had to get attack speed on my flask. Yeah, right. It was attack speed, and I ended up all spamming for attack speed and literally imprint spamming for increased effect on my flask. Like I had never even thought about using imprint beasts on flasks because they're so expensive, but
Yeah.
it was just there's actually upgrade potential for flasks now that make you want to do something like that. Especially when you need perfect flasks, especially paired with a mage blood, you really want to have those T1 rolls, those perfect things. It's very, very important. So, no, honestly, really, really happy with what they did on the defense side of things and on the flask side of things, because you can play reactively, but you can also play uh, uh, proactively, and you can also kind of decide if you want like immunity or do you want just like reduced effect, because then you can pair that up with some reduced effect on the tree to get immunity that way. Flask has just kind of become another tool, and then you can automate them with the enkindling orb, which is another really cool thing, right? When you hit a unique or rare, or when flasks or charges are full, you basically you kind of have a, I guess you could say, like a free mage blood without the increased effect on your flask by just using the not the enkindling orbs. What's the name of the other ones? I can't
Instilling orb.
remember. Yeah, instilling orbs. And as long as you're killing monsters, it's basically like you never have to collect your flask. So that's also a really good thing. Honestly, the flash changes. In this point of the game, I think flasks are in a great spot. I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's just amazing to see that just the character progression feeling on having flask. That's another 5 spots of progression, and that feels good when you buy that flask or you roll that flask that is used of your build. Just that alone feels good. But the fact that they hit the
Yep.
spot with the proactive, reactive, the flask changes and with the orbs and everything, I think they've reached a really, really good spot in terms of balance for all aspects of the game. And I think they've really hit the spot there. I don't have anything to add when it comes to flask in general. It's just from
Yeah,
being
I
the
know.
shittiest ever to being the greatest ever. So they really made that great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the future, the game. Like last league, honestly, I was even saying it on stream. If they keep going down that route, I don't know if content for Path of Exile is going to be a thing. Like I don't know if I'll be able to keep doing this. Like nothing was doing good in terms of analytics or in terms of how the game felt to play. And this league, it was just a complete turnaround. I'm like, yeah, any sort of doubts that I had for the game are completely gone. I'm just looking forward to the next league and hoping that they deliver once again, which I'm sure they will. And if they don't, well, we're going to be there to say that they didn't, just as we are there to say that they do when they do.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like we said before, like we covered quite a lot in today's little podcast. But I think that in general, we feel like the TLDR is that they're doing generally a really fucking good job. Obviously, there's a lot of problems, but there's nowhere near the amount of problems that we felt that the game had back in 3.15. But yeah, unless there's any other topic you want to dive into, I mean, I guess we can round things off here and.
No, I mean we've touched quite a few things. I mean, a lot of new stuff, a lot of old stuff. Save the game. We've talked about quite a few things. So
I guess the only thing to remember from this interview or the interview podcast, I'm not sure what we're gonna call this podcast, is that save the cheerleader, save the game. Very important. I should watch that series soon again, actually. So you haven't seen it? I see your expression. You haven't seen Hero?
well,
No
no.
way. No way. Okay, we need to have a conversation about this later. Okay. Yeah, we need to have a serious discussion about this. Anyways, for those of
Okay.
you who haven't seen this podcast before, this is a podcast that we're calling Sit Down With, and then insert whoever we're inviting in. We've had a couple of episodes in the past. We only have one topic, and that is the game. In this episode, we talked about Path of Exile. That's it. We have no structure, no questions whatsoever. Chat is free to spam some shit up if you want to, and we're just having a friendly conversation, two friends amongst between each other, and we just see where the topic lands. Today, we've covered a lot about currency and topics of making currency, some aspirational content and whatnot. Hope you guys had fun watching this. Thanks so much, Pat, for coming in. Where can we find you? What are you up to in the coming days on your stream?
You can find me at twitch.tv/Path of Math or youtube.com/Matt Guides. Can't swap that one somehow. And I mean, right now you're about to do some magic find probably today for the last day, but if you're watching this, it's probably gone already. So another zero hero coming up, hideout warrior style, flipping, crafting, teaching the ways of the not playing the game, how to make currency. Especially good for people with limited time. It's like this necessary evil where you can kind of just put away having fun with the game for a little bit in order to have fun later with a better build and headhunter stuff like that. Because you're not really going to make more money with little investment than you are if you're just kind of sitting in your hideout. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing for the next few days. probably gonna work our way up to a headhunter, daily updates on the YouTube channel, and then after that, I'm not sure, maybe another one.
Maybe another one. Well, there we have it. I'm going to leave links in the descriptions below for those of you watching this on YouTube for both Path of Matth and my own links to where you can find me. Either way, boys, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys had fun with this podcast, and I'll see you later. So till then, stay safe, keep rocking.